It was when I was asked to help with outpatient consultations due to a shortage of doctors at the nearby large hospital. As I arrived at the hospital, I saw a beautiful patient standing alone in the garden, soaking in the heavy rain. "What are you doing out here like this?" Her eyes were red, her voice trembling as she said, "They told me they have no time to deal with poor people suffering from incurable diseases." Abandoning a patient was unthinkable. Feeling this way, I took out my phone, explained the situation to some brilliant doctors, and decided to help her. Little did I know that this decision would greatly alter the course of my destiny. My name is Harry Smith. I'm a doctor. But don't imagine some prestigious university hospital or anything like that. I work as a doctor at a very small, humble hospital. Our hospital's philosophy prioritizes caring for patients above all else. Given the hospital's size, we can't accept a large number of patients, but I believe that is precisely what makes it wonderful. Because of this, I was often busy, but I was rarely overwhelmed with endless consultations or surgeries. Today, I was on my way to the large hospital after receiving a request for help due to a shortage of doctors. The hospital is relatively close to where I work, and I always had the impression that it was overflowing with patients. Given its sheer size, it likely gave patients a sense of security. I understood that if multiple conditions were discovered, they could receive treatment and care all the way through recovery at the same place. And so, when the large hospital requests assistance, someone like me, who works at a small hospital, comes rushing to provide support. As always, the large hospital was bustling with patients, their families, and visitors. Yeah, no wonder they called me for help. Pushing through the crowd, I made my way to the waiting area, where my attention was immediately drawn to someone taking charge with an air of authority. Whenever I was asked to help, I had to check in with Shane, the son of the hospital's director, Mr. Carter, who was in charge. As I started walking toward Shane, I noticed someone groaning in clear pain, their expression filled with suffering. I didn't know the diagnosis, as I hadn't examined her yet, but it was obvious she was in bad shape. Just as I was about to approach the patient, Shane stopped me. "You're late. You need to get here immediately when we call you. This is a real problem." I had come as fast as humanly possible. But arguing back would only escalate things, so I just said, "Sorry." If you're sorry, show it through your actions. That patient over there looks like they're in serious pain. Can I take a look? Don't act on your own. That patient is fine. You can leave them alone. There's a patient who needs surgery right now. And that's where we need you. Without giving me a chance to object, Shane led me straight to the operating room. I couldn't stand Shane's methods. Even as I operated on the current patient, I couldn't shake the feeling that the other patient, the one Shane ignored, was in far worse condition. I was certain that patient needed surgery immediately. But I also knew it was useless to say anything to Shane. The patient I was operating on was the daughter of a major corporation's CEO. You don't need me to explain what that means. Shane prioritized patients based on their social status. There is a reason he does so. It is very obvious. Money. He took bribes from wealthy people. It was common for surgeries to be rescheduled, even if that meant postponing patients with serious conditions. Those who paid the most always came first. He had no sense of medical pride or ethics. No, I was certain Shane had none of that. Still, I said nothing. This wasn't the hospital where I worked. Of course, I had my opinions, but as an outsider, there was nothing I could do by speaking up. I carried out the surgery I was told to perform and quietly returned to my own hospital. Sometime later, I was once again summoned to the large hospital. "Come immediately. You have no right to refuse. Even if your hospital is busy, ignore it and get over here." Shane's arrogant tone hadn't changed. Still, I couldn't help but wonder. If they were so short-staffed, why not just hire more doctors? Well, I already had a hunch. Increasing the number of doctors would raise personnel costs and cut into profits. Once you hire someone, it's not easy to let them go. It was cheaper to call on nearby or affiliated doctors temporarily. No one here worked for free. The reality was that without profits, the hospital couldn't stay afloat. But still, with the constant overflow of patients and hours-long wait times, I couldn't believe this was sustainable. Then again, that was just an outsider's opinion. They must have held their own discussions internally and decided this was the way to go. It didn't matter what I thought. But still, with those unpleasant thoughts floating around in my head, I made my way to the large hospital. The weather was awful, with a heavy downpour soaking everything. Holding my umbrella, I walked toward the towering structure of the hospital, which loomed over the city no matter which direction you looked from. Its exterior, like a luxury high-rise, exuded an imposing presence. It was a stark contrast to the tiny hospital where I worked. Reaching the staff entrance, I placed my hand on the doorknob only to see something that made me think my eyes were playing tricks on me. That can't be right, I muttered, slinging my closed umbrella over my arm and rubbing my eyes before looking again at the courtyard. It seemed I wasn't imagining things after all. Unbelievably, there was a woman in pajamas, standing in the pouring rain. She had to be one of the hospital's patients. She stared up at the sky, as though completely oblivious to the rain drenching her. Her profile was delicate, otherworldly, and beautiful. Yet she radiated an aura of overwhelming sadness. For a moment, I forgot all about time as I stood there staring at her. Snapping out of it, I shook my head a few times and rushed toward her. "What are you doing out here? You're going to catch a cold if you keep standing in this rain." I held my umbrella over her, shielding her from the relentless rain, and that's when I noticed it. The woman was crying. The rain had masked her tears, so I hadn't seen them until now. As she slowly turned toward me, her eyes were red from weeping. How long had she been here? How long had she been crying? I didn't know, but she was clearly consumed by grief. I waited for her to answer. Beautiful woman didn't open her mouth easily. But finally, in a thin voice, she muttered, "They said they have no time for someone poor. And because I have an incurable disease, there's no point in treating me." She fell silent again, closed her eyes, and let fresh tears stream down her face. But that was all I needed to hear to understand. This woman was a patient here, and she had been abandoned by Shane, the cruel son of Mr. Carter. There was no other way to interpret it. From the woman's demeanor, I could sense she was thinking, "I'm beyond saving anyway, so what does it matter if I get soaked in the rain?" Her tear-streaked face showed a resignation that said she had given up on everything. As a doctor, I couldn't just leave her like this. I don't know who told you what, but it might still be too soon to give up. For now, let's get out of here. You'll catch a cold if you stay in this rain. She didn't say a word. But when I gently urged her to walk, she followed me. I needed to find out about her symptoms. I called my hospital and informed them that things might get complicated. Our hospital was small, but we have several doctors who can be called geniuses. With their help, I was sure we could do something. Before heading back, I managed to coax her name out of her. Her name is Alice. It suited her beauty perfectly, though this wasn't the time to say something like, "That's a lovely name." I kept my thoughts to myself. Before I could take Alice to my hospital, there was something I had to do. I moved her to a covered area, handed her a towel and blanket loaned to me from the hospital, and headed to my usual spot. And then headed to where Shane was, still barking orders with his usual arrogance. "You're late again. When we call, you need to come immediately. We're busy here." Shane snapped. I cut him off mid-rant. "I need to ask you something. There's a patient here named Alice, right? Alice? Oh, that poor girl. We don't have time to waste resources on someone like her. She's not one of our patients, she doesn't have any money. What about her? I'll take her to my hospital." "You don't care about her, so it won't be a problem, will it?" Shane gave me a look like I was the biggest idiot he'd ever seen. Do as you like. Operating on her would bring in zero money anyway. We don't have time for surgeries that aren't cost-effective. It's far more productive to take care of our big spenders. The fact that he could say something so disgraceful without batting an eye, it was appalling. But saying anything to him would be pointless. Well then, I'll be leaving for the day. How pathetic. I bet you were just fooled by her pretty face. You think you'll save her and maybe, just maybe, she'll fall for you? Gross. You might think I'm a monster, but you're no better than me. If you're not going to help, then get out. You're in the way. I swallowed my anger, glaring at nothing in particular to calm myself down, and hurried back to Alice. Are you feeling cold? Let's go, it's not too far from here. About a 10-minute walk. Okay. It was just one word, but at least she responded. When we arrived at my hospital, I took her straight to the examination room. Before we begin, can I ask about your condition? At my question, Alice looked down. Her expression clouded. For a while, silence filled the room. I waited patiently. Finally, she raised her head and softly said the diagnosis. They said I have heart valve disease. Heart valve disease. I see. This was a serious condition. Medication alone wouldn't be enough for a cure. To treat this properly, she would need open heart surgery. If left untreated, even without symptoms, the 5-year survival rate was only 50%. If symptoms of heart failure had already begun, her life expectancy would be just 2 to 3 years. The surgery was complex. After opening the chest, the heart would have to be temporarily stopped, then cut open to repair the valve. Although the failure rate of the surgery itself is low, it is a complicated procedure. So it was easy to imagine Shane tossing it aside as not being worth the money. He would have shunned her by saying she was incurable, poor, etc. The first doctor she met was the worst. I knew it would be difficult. Sorry for making you look like that. It seemed I had been unconsciously making a difficult expression. Shaking off all the negativity, I spoke firmly. Yes, it's a difficult disease, but don't worry. I'm not going to abandon you. There are skilled doctors here at our hospital, not just me, and we will give everything we've got to save you. That's right, I would never abandon her. Because I had faced a situation like this once before. Memories of my mother surfaced in my mind. How many years had it been? My mother had been diagnosed with a severe illness. I was just a child back then, too young to remember the name of the disease. Yet, the scenes remained crystal clear in my mind. Both my parents were still young. My mother had suddenly been hospitalized. I overheard a conversation when relatives came to our house after visiting her. Why does someone as kind as her, who always wishes for others' happiness, have to suffer like this? My father had cried out, and then, for the first and only time in my life, I saw him break down in tears. Our relatives had tried their best to console him. Everyone thought my mother wouldn't make it. But she survived. The surgery's success rate was less than 20%. Yet the doctor who took charge of her case refused to give up and performed the operation flawlessly. Because of that doctor, both my parents are still alive and well today. Whenever I visit them both during their long breaks and see how happy they are, I am reminded of how deeply grateful I am to the doctor I was then. No. I got lost in memories. You don't need to worry about anything. As for the hospital fees or surgery costs, you don't have to pay them all at once. We'll arrange a plan that works for you. Please trust us and leave it to me. Alice looked straight into my eyes. Her expression was no longer the hollow, resigned look of someone who had stood in the rain. There was life in her eyes now. Please. I trust you. I feel like I can leave everything in your hands. If it doesn't work out, I'll just accept that it was my fate. Don't talk like that. We're going to help you with everything we've got. Our team of skilled doctors will save you. Thank you. Hearing you say that gives me so much hope. For the first time, Alice smiled. It was far more captivating than the sad expression she had worn earlier. After that, I spent my days working with the talented doctors at our hospital to create a surgical plan for Alice. Our hospital may have been small, but it was full of doctors brimming with passion, people who wanted to confront patients' illnesses head-on and help them return to their normal lives. We consulted experienced surgeons, listing out the best possible methods for the operation. And before I knew it, the day of Alice's surgery had arrived. I'll do it. I'll make sure the surgery is a success. In the midst of my hot and strong determination, I received a phone call from someone whose face and voice I did not want to see or hear. I heard something unbelievable, so I had to call. Are you really planning to go through with that woman's surgery? Ever since I had taken Alice under my care, Shane had stopped calling me for help. Or rather, even if he did call, I simply didn't respond. After seeing how he treated Alice, I had no intention of listening to him ever again. Of course, I still worried about the patients at his hospital, but I wasn't omniscient or all-powerful. Sometimes, you have to make choices. Perhaps that's why Shane, who had previously kept his tone somewhat businesslike, was now speaking to me with an overly casual air. Yes. I'm sorry, but I don't have time to talk. May I hang up now? Come on, don't be like that. Look, if you want, I can send you an easier patient instead of dealing with that troublesome woman. There's no shortage of patients who can't pay, you know. You like taking care of the rejects, don't you? That won't be necessary. I'll be focusing on the surgery now, so I'll take my leave. Acting all noble, huh? I was offering you something helpful, and you refuse? Don't get cocky. You're not as important as you think, you know. There was no point in dealing with him any further. I silently hung up the phone. I didn't have time for his nonsense. Before the surgery, Alice sat nervously, her expression tense. Of course she was nervous. For us, as doctors, surgeries are part of our daily lives, but for patients, this is not something they go through often. I wanted to say something to ease her mind, even just a little. Is there anything you want to do once you're healed, Alice? Something I want to do? There's one thing that comes to mind. That's great. What is it? I want to do something for my mother. I was raised in a single-parent home. We didn't have much, but I grew up surrounded by love. My mother worked so hard for me, even though her health wasn't strong. If it weren't for her efforts, I wouldn't be here today. I can tell that you were raised with a lot of love. It shows in who you are. Really? That makes me happy to hear. I want to overcome this surgery, meet a wonderful man, and start a family. I think growing up in a single-parent home made me want to build a family of my own even more. Hearing her words, I felt my resolve harden even further. Don't worry. I know you'll be able to build a beautiful family. We're going to make this surgery a success. I promise. I'll put everything I've learned and all my experience into healing you. Hearing that, Alice showed me the brightest smile yet. Her soft expression was radiant, far more beautiful than any sadness could ever be. We followed the surgical plan we had prepared so meticulously. Though success rates have improved over the years, the risk of failure is never zero. But this time, everything went according to plan, and the surgery was a success. When Alice woke up from the anesthesia and saw my face, she whispered a quiet thank you. Thank you so much. You successfully performed the surgery. I was so anxious last night that I couldn't sleep. But seeing Alice's face here now makes me so happy. Thank you. Alice's mother wiped away her tears with a tissue, repeatedly thanking me through her sobs. More than anything, I'm just glad the surgery went well. Taking a deep breath as I sat in the break room, sipping a coffee I had just bought from the vending machine. I had no idea that the results of this surgery would have such an unexpected impact on our hospital. We had implemented a new technique that had been gaining attention in the medical community, and its success spread like wildfire. Before long, the hospital's reputation soared, and patients began flocking to us. The effects didn't stop there. Our hospital, though small, offered a broad range of specialties. Patients who had been frustrated by the long waits and impersonal treatment at the large hospital began coming to us instead. The ripple effect reached even Shane's high-paying VIP patients, who also began seeking care at our hospital. I hadn't expected any of this. It never crossed my mind that the outcome of one surgery would spread so far and wide. Now that this had happened, I knew we couldn't just let it happen. Surely there is one person who does not feel good about this outcome. Shane came to my mind. And, sure enough, he responded in the most dramatic way imaginable. He stormed into our hospital himself. "Hey, Harry. Just because you've gotten a little fame doesn't mean you can go stealing our top clients. You're out of line. We called you in for extra cash, and this is how you repay us? You're an ungrateful piece of garbage." Shane's words came out calmly at first, but the fury boiling under the surface was impossible to miss. Still, it was nothing but petty resentment. He didn't realize that his neglect of patients and focus on profits had driven them away. "This is just a result of our hospital's philosophy, Shane. We've always prioritized caring for our patients. And this surgery simply brought that to light. If you continue treating patients as nothing but money, this outcome was inevitable. It was only a matter of time." When I said this in one breath, Shane was hostile and started to stamp his feet. It was the act of a child resentful of things not going his way. "Don't get so full of yourself. You're acting like it's all my fault. But I know what you're doing, you're spreading news of that surgery everywhere to show off. A tiny, second-rate hospital like this wouldn't stand a chance otherwise. Don't think you'll keep writing this way forever." Shane spat out his parting words, his anger radiating from every fiber of his being as he stormed out. It's no use talking to him anymore, I thought. Shane and I were fundamentally different. Even if we spent an eternity arguing, we would never reach a common ground. It was pointless to even try. Besides, we worked in separate hospitals. I figured we would probably never cross paths again, so I focused on my own work. But then something completely unexpected happened. Rumors began to spread that I had committed multiple medical errors in the past and had been covering them up. The response has been tremendous thanks to the extensive coverage on the terrestrial news. And our hospital has been receiving so many calls that it has interfered with business operations. I have no idea what they're talking about. I swear, I don't know anything about this. After the news broke, the higher-ups at the hospital called me in to explain. I opened with those words immediately. Be that as it may, this was reported widely on the news. Isn't it possible someone dug up something from your past? With all due respect, I haven't hidden anything. I've never made a medical mistake, let alone covered one up. I truly don't understand how this could be happening. You've worked hard for us for a long time, and you successfully performed that new surgical technique. I want to believe you, I really do. But the pressure from public opinion is hard for a small hospital like ours to withstand. Wouldn't it be easier just to cut ties with him? That would settle the issue and protect the hospital. No. Let's take a break. We'll clear our heads and revisit this with cooler tempers. The discussion ended in deadlock. I was told that my fate would be decided after the break, so I walked aimlessly through the hospital corridors. What the hell am I supposed to do? That thought played on an endless loop in my head. No matter how hard I tried to think of a solution, I couldn't come up with anything. In the first place, I did not do anything, so there is no way I can find any evidence. But as the rumors spread, the impact began to show. The number of patients coming to the hospital dropped dramatically, and even inpatients began to be transferred to other hospitals. The speed of it all was staggering. You could visibly see more empty rooms each day. My colleagues, who I thought were my friends, at first said to me, "You don't do that," but recently they have been distant. As if they don't want any trouble at all. This was what hurt the most. I had thought we shared strong bonds of trust. Now, I felt completely alone. It seemed like everyone was looking at me with suspicion. How did it come to this? I had worked so hard for the hospital and for my patients. Where had things gone so wrong? It felt like some invisible force was at work against me, something I couldn't fight. If that's true, there's nothing I can do about it. Because how can I catch the tail of such a thing? With despair weighing me down, I continued wandering the halls. However, I did not know myself how long I could endure this state of affairs. I knew it wouldn't take long for my heart to completely give out. When the break ended, I returned to the meeting room. The executives' faces were as grim as before, and hopelessness swallowed me whole. "Do you have any final words to say?" "No. This is for the good of the hospital. I hope you understand. Why do I have to go through something so unfair?" My spirit had been completely broken. I felt like I couldn't fight anymore. I was ready to accept whatever punishment they decided on. I stared blankly at the sterile ceiling. Then suddenly, the door burst open. Alice walked in briskly, her expression calm but determined. "What is the meaning of this? You can't just walk in without knocking. This area is off limits to unauthorized personnel." Ignoring the harsh words directed at her, Alice spoke sharply and confidently. "I've been listening outside for a while now. Why is this discussion proceeding as if Dr. Smith is guilty? I was one of his patients. And I know him well enough to say this. There's no way a doctor as dedicated to his patients as Dr. Smith would ever cover up a medical mistake. Even when we talked, he always had his patients' best interests at heart." I was stunned. Never in my wildest dreams did I expect Alice to storm into this room and defend me so boldly. "If you're so sure," one of the executives began, "can you provide evidence to prove his innocence?" "Absolutely. I have a lead that can uncover the truth. Give me a little time to investigate." Alice turned to me, giving a firm nod before striding out of the room with purpose. "Well, it seems you have at least one patient who trusts you," the executive said. "We'll give that woman time to conduct her investigation. But we can't wait forever. Until then, you're on suspension." And so, I found myself confined to my apartment, unable to focus on anything. Alice's sudden entrance replayed in my mind over and over. How could she be so confident? She said she had a clue, but I had no idea what it was. 3 days passed. Without a single call or message. I began to fear the worst, that no one would contact me, and I'd simply be dismissed from the hospital without a word. That thought loomed constantly in my mind, gnawing at me. I stopped eating, drinking only the bare minimum of water. Just as I felt I couldn't endure the stagnation any longer, my phone rang. The number was unregistered. Warily, I picked up. "Sorry for the sudden call, Dr. Smith. We found proof of your innocence. Can you come to the hospital right now? Is this real?" I asked, my voice cracking with disbelief. "Yes. I'll explain everything when you get here. Please trust me." Her voice was confident, brimming with resolve. Finally, I showered, shaved my overgrown beard, and made my way to the hospital feeling lighter for the first time in days. At the entrance, Alice was waiting for me. "Everything's been arranged. Let's go." When we entered the conference room, the executives were seated, and there, sitting nervously, hunched in his chair, was Shane. I knew it. I thought maybe, or rather, Shane's words, "Don't think that things will continue to go well like this in the future," were sticking to me so badly that I thought he was going to do something about it. But I also knew he wouldn't be so bold as to make up a medical error. Let me start by saying this: I am a police officer. The room fell into stunned silence. I suspected that someone was intentionally spreading false information about Dr. Smith's alleged medical errors. So, I used every tool at my disposal to investigate. What I found was that Shane here orchestrated the entire smear campaign. All eyes turned to Shane, who looked visibly shaken. Still, he wasn't the type to admit defeat so easily. What proof do you have? You're making this up. And who's to say you're really a cop? Without missing a beat, Alice pulled out her ID badge, holding it up for all to see. That could be fake. Call the police and confirm it. Don't listen to this crazy woman. Shane's voice rose in panic. You're just bitter because I kicked you out of the hospital. Don't get cocky just because you survived one stupid surgery, you broke loser. Can you explain this? She then thrust an A4-size sheet of paper in front of Shane with a large picture of a man with a bad physiognomy. In an instant, Shane's complexion turned earthy. This individual was paid to hack media outlets and spread the fabricated stories about Dr. Smith's medical malpractice. We found him. And when questioned, he spilled everything. He confessed to working under Shane's orders. There's no escaping this now. No, wait, this is a mistake. You have it wrong. At that moment, Mr. Carter suddenly stood up, his face flushed with anger. Shane, you despicable fool. Do you have any idea what you've done? If this gets out to the media, our hospital will be ruined. You've dragged us all into this mess. You'll bear full responsibility for this. Pack your things and get out now. From this moment on, you are no longer my son. I've also heard about how you've been discriminating against patients, prioritizing the rich while bullying others and threatening our doctors to stay silent. You're a disgrace to everything we stand for as medical professionals. Now leave. No, this can't be. Get out. Terrified by the sight of him banging his desk repeatedly with his fist in a rage, Shane fled out of the conference room as if to escape. No one ever saw him again after that day. Rumors floated around about a man wandering aimlessly through desolate places, looking over his shoulder in constant fear. It seemed that Shane, now obsessed with avoiding anyone's gaze, lived like a shadow, hiding away from the world. What happens when someone who worshipped money loses everything? Only God knows. And now, for the epilogue. A few hours after Shane left the hospital, the media began publicly announcing that the claims of my medical malpractice cover-up had been false. The news spread across online platforms as well, and slowly but surely, the tide of public opinion turned in our favor. Not long after, my fellow doctors came to apologize to me. We didn't want to act like that, but Shane was watching us, and we had no choice but to keep our distance. Everyone said the same thing. Now, things are back to normal between me and my colleagues. I understand why they acted the way they did. Nobody wanted to fall into the same trap after seeing what happened to me. It couldn't be helped. With Shane gone, it was time to let it all go and move forward. There was also a change in my personal life. After things calmed down a bit, I invited Alice to dinner to thank her for believing in me and working tirelessly to gather evidence to clear my name. When I met and talked with them in private and on equal footing, rather than as doctor and patient, I learned that we both take professionalism and pride in our work. Not only that, but we discovered we had a lot in common, even our hobbies matched surprisingly well. Where should we go next? When can we see each other again? As we made promise after promise, something deeper grew between us. And we eventually started dating. Having overcome that crisis together, I know we can face any challenge that comes our way. I want to build up the warm family that Alice told me about at that time. They said, "We don't serve food to poor people." That's what they told me. Under the rain that had just begun, the beautiful woman stood alone in front of the restaurant. The meal she had been looking forward to for so long was ruined by the heartless actions of the restaurant owner. Devastated, she could do nothing but lower her head and let her tears fall. Her pain resonated with me as if it were my own. I could never forgive the person who made her feel this way. I stood up and made a call. "Hello, get me Mr. Reed. Right now." "Wha? Who are you?" Startled, she looked at me, and I revealed the truth. The truth is, this restaurant and I. Helping this woman get revenge wasn't just about her. It was also the start of a new chapter in my life. My name is Simon Courier, 35 years old. Today, I was invited by a friend to dine at a certain restaurant. Apparently, it's been especially popular lately. Rumor has it some international VIPs have visited in secret. Wow, that sounds impressive. I'm looking forward to it. Tonight, the sky was overcast. The heavy clouds looming above looked like they could start pouring rain at any moment. Still, it's lunch with a friend I haven't seen in a few years. My heart is bouncing with joy. So, this is Chateau Blanc, huh? Chateau Blanc, a French restaurant, was a renowned high-end establishment. The building, made of stone in a classic French architectural style, featured polished marble columns that gleamed even in the rain. Its modest yet dignified sign exuded an air of refined elegance. Seeing its exterior, I could understand why celebrities flocked to this place. Of course, the food itself had a reputation for impressing even the most discerning palates. "Come on, it's our reservation time. Let's go." Urged by my friend, I began climbing the large steps leading to the entrance. However, apologies, were fully booked for tonight. A young couple who appeared to have come without a reservation was being turned away by the doorman. "I can't believe this. We came all this way," a frustrated voice grumbled. "Ah, poor things. But it's no surprise. This place might as well be reservations only nowadays. Is it really that popular? Simon, you've been away from the States too long. If it weren't for a lucky cancellation, I would have had to wait 2 months to get a table here." Really? I was a bit taken aback by his words. The restaurant had been fairly popular even before I left for work overseas, but it hadn't been anything like this. They say the owner changed recently. Maybe that's why. Talking as we went, we had no trouble entering under my friend's reservation. Walking down the hallway, the quintessential sounds of a luxury restaurant enveloped us. Polite, low-volume conversations and soft laughter from dining guests. A gentle piano melody playing unobtrusively, adding charm to the atmosphere. And the light clinking of cutlery meeting fine plates here and there. This is a nice place. Here, it feels like. Murmuring to myself, I followed the staff to our reserved table. That's when it happened. A bright electronic tone rang out, completely out of place in the serene ambience. "Ah, sorry, give me a sec. Go ahead without me." It was a call from a work contact. I should have kept my phone on silent. I fumbled to pull it out of my pocket as I hurried toward the entrance. And then, forgetting about the ringtone entirely, I was captivated by the scene before me. The entrance door of Chateau Blanc was made entirely of glass, allowing a clear view of the restaurant's interior from outside. And vice versa, the staircase we had just climbed was visible from inside. Standing halfway up that staircase, in the rain that had just started to fall, was someone gazing up toward the restaurant. It's not my imagination, that's a real person. The figure, dressed in a sleeveless dress, appeared to be a woman. Could she be a customer? If so, why hadn't the doorman approached her? Why was she just standing there? Even as these questions crossed my mind, I found myself rushing outside. At that moment, the doorman's harsh voice reached my ears. "You filthy country bumpkin. How many times do I have to tell you? People like you, dressed like that, are not welcome here." The doorman glared down at the woman with eyes that regarded her as less than human. His hostility was extreme, and a small crowd had started to gather around them. A few passers-by watched the woman with sympathetic eyes. "We don't have time to serve someone as poor as you. Now get lost." The doorman continued his tirade relentlessly. The woman, soaked by the rain, merely stood there trembling, her head bowed. Her pitiful figure was so heartbreaking it made my chest tighten just looking at her. Around us, murmurs of "that's awful" and "poor thing" began to spread. Yet, no one dared to step in. "You're lowering the status of this place just by being here. Get out of here already." The doorman's insults grew more unhinged. At that moment, something inside me snapped. "Is there a problem here?" I shouted as I approached the woman. The doorman flinched for a moment but quickly recovered his haughty demeanor. "Sir, are you acquainted with this lowly woman?" "My apologies, but people like her, this trash, don't belong here." My anger reached its boiling point. "What do you think you're doing?" I stepped closer to him. "No matter the circumstances, how can you humiliate someone like this? Who do you think this restaurant is?" The woman raised her face, looking at me with tear-soaked eyes. I had a reservation and was so looking forward to it. But then, her voice quivered. As she lifted her face, her tear-streaked eyes met mine, and I couldn't help but gasp. "She's stunning." Through the strands of wet hair plastered to her forehead, her large, clear eyes gazed at me. Framed by long lashes, with a straight nose and softly parted lips, her face was so flawlessly beautiful it seemed unreal. Which made me all the more perplexed. Why was this happening to her? Did something happen? I asked. She averted her gaze again. "For now, we couldn't just stand here getting drenched." Pointing to the eaves of Chateau Blanc, I said, "Let's go over there." "But..." "What?" To my surprise, she shook her head. "Because..." "What?" Her voice, soft and faint, was drowned out by the growing sound of the rain. I leaned in closer, straining to hear. Finally, I caught her words. "They said there's nothing to feed a poor person like me." "What?" I instinctively turned to look back at the doorman standing at the top of the stairs. The same man who had greeted my friend and me with a smile and a warm welcome now averted his eyes awkwardly when our gazes met. Almost as if admitting he had deliberately discriminated against this woman. "I've been looking forward to this for half a year." The woman's words rang out clearly, piercing through the rain and the chaos. In that moment, I removed my jacket and gently draped it over her shoulders. "Then, please take my place." "What?" "I'll give you my reserved seat. I'll explain it to the friend I came with. He's a good guy, he'll understand." To be honest, I didn't want her to dine at a restaurant that treated people so poorly. But at the same time, I couldn't let her give up on something she had been eagerly anticipating for so long. "Come on, let's go." I extended my hand to her, but she didn't take it. Instead, she shook her head weakly. "Thank you, but I'm fine now." "Ah." Before I could stop her, she returned my jacket. Then ran down the rain-soaked stairs. Watching her retreating figure, I lost all appetite for dinner. "Hello, sorry, but I'll cover the cancellation fee later," I said briefly to my friend over the phone before following the woman down the stairs. "Wait, please, it's dangerous." My shout caused her to slow her pace a little as she splashed through the rain. At the same time, my worst fear came true. "Ah! Eek!" Her heel slipped on the wet sidewalk, and just as she lost her balance, I stretched out my hand as far as I could and grabbed her arm tightly. "Thank you." She finally turned to face me. Her rain-soaked face full of mixed emotions. Relief at not falling. And then, uncertainty and wariness, her eyes seemed to ask, "Why is this person chasing after me? I swear I'm not suspicious, but maybe we could head into that cafe over there?" I suggested hesitantly. "Ha?" When I pointed to a cafe down the street, she furrowed her brow suspiciously. Shoot, I must have made her even more cautious. I was starting to panic internally when. Achoo! She let out a small sneeze. Then shivered visibly. You're going to catch a cold at this rate. At least let's wait out the rain and have something warm to drink, I urged. But. For a moment, her eyes wavered with hesitation. Then, her gaze fell on my soaked shoulders. All right, she finally said with a small nod. Inside the cafe, the air conditioning was brisk and a bit chilly. I chose a seat in the corner, away from the draft, and ordered 2 hot teas while also asking the staff for some towels. As she finished drying her hair, I decided to ask her a question. First, may I ask your name? I am. She hesitated for a moment before softly responding, holding the warm cup in her hands. Her name was Tina Bellwood, and she was 28 years old. I introduced myself as well, explaining how I had come across her. Simon, is it? Tina looked directly into my eyes and, in a small voice, asked, Why did you speak to me? Her question was one I answered without hesitation. I couldn't just leave you there. Seeing you standing in the rain. I couldn't ignore it. Oh. Her eyes widened slightly in surprise. And for a moment, I thought I saw tears welling up again. Tina, would you mind telling me what happened? She lowered her gaze and fell silent for a moment. Then, as if making up her mind, she raised her head and began to speak cautiously. What she shared was almost unbelievable. I'm a farmer, actually, she began. She had been born and raised on a small family farm that had been passed down through generations. Now, she was running the farm on her own, having inherited it from her parents. On our farm, we grow a variety of vegetables each season, like asparagus and green peas in spring, tomatoes and eggplants in summer, pumpkins and spinach in fall, and cauliflower and broccoli in winter. Wow! I sell these vegetables at the local farmers market, and the rest are supplied exclusively to Chateau Blanc. Her eyes sparkled for a moment as she spoke about her work. But the mention of Chateau Blanc caused her expression to darken again. Every day, I work so hard to grow these vegetables. I've always been curious about what kind of dishes a top-tier chef would create with them. It's been a dream of mine since I took over the farm. She paused, her voice catching, before forcing herself to continue. So I finally decided to make a reservation. That was when it all began. Shortly after Tina arrived at Chateau Blanc, she gave her name to the doorman, expecting to be seated. But instead, she was coldly told, Ms. Bellwood, Mr. Reed has instructed us not to allow you entry. What? But I made this reservation 6 months ago. When she pressed for an explanation, the doorman connected her to Mr. Reed over the phone. And over that call, the restaurant owner said, if I'd known you were the daughter of Bellwood Farms, I wouldn't have accepted your reservation in the first place. French cuisine is all about aroma. A sweaty, muddy farmer walking in would ruin everything. Surely, you're not standing at the main entrance in your usual filthy work clothes? Even on a normal day, your presence is unbearable. Don't disgrace us or our properly dressed guests. The final blow came as he snapped. There's no food here for poor people like you, before abruptly hanging up. That's awful. My hands clenched into fists as I struggled to contain my anger. By the time Tina finished recounting her story, she had fallen silent, her head hanging low. A small droplet of water fell onto the table. It wasn't rain, but her tears. I looked up the dress code, made sure to follow it. I even put on makeup, something I don't usually do. Her voice trembled as she clenched her fists tightly on the table. More tears began to fall, dripping onto her hands and pooling on the table. Her blue dress, simple yet elegant, was a perfect match for her clean and graceful demeanor. The hair accessory holding her golden locks and her shiny pumps, all soaked and ruined by the rain, spoke of her anticipation for the day. Every detail was something she had carefully prepared for this occasion, only to have it all trampled on. But you still look absolutely lovely, I said softly. What? She lifted her tear-streaked face, looking at me with a faint, weary smile. I always entered through the back entrance. I never realized how beautiful Chateau Blanc looked from the front. The pure white stone walls, the marble columns, the glow of the chandelier through the doors. It was like a castle I dreamed about as a little girl. I just wanted to take one last look before leaving. That was why she had been standing on the stairs in the pouring rain. Unforgivable. Anger welled up in me again. How could she speak so fondly of a place that had treated her so cruelly? The actions of Chateau Blanc, and especially the words of Mr. Reed, were beyond reprehensible. As a human being, and as someone involved in the culinary arts, he had utterly failed. I took a deep breath, suppressing my anger, and put on a smile. I'm sure they must be amazing. What? Tina asked, startled. The vegetables you grow. Supplying them to a high-end restaurant like that. I must have missed out on something incredible by not tasting them. As I joked lightly, Tina lifted her face. Of course, they are, she said with conviction, her eyes shining brightly. I pour my heart into growing them. I adjust the soil preparation for each season and vegetable. I use pesticides only when absolutely necessary and always aim to minimize their use. Every day, I check the crops carefully to ensure they're healthy and have the nutrients they need. Wow! Admiringly, I thought to myself, I knew it. She loved her vegetables, and she loved farming. With so much care and passion poured into her work, her produce couldn't possibly be anything less than extraordinary. That's incredible. I don't think I've ever met a farmer with as much passion as you, Tina. Simon, are you? Tina tilted her head curiously. I decided to tell her that I was a French chef. That I was particular about sourcing my ingredients directly from farmers I met personally. You're a chef? Yes. If it's all right with you, could I visit your farm someday? What? I'd like to see it with my own eyes, the passion you put into growing your vegetables. Well, Tina's eyes widened, and her expression began to brighten visibly. Absolutely. She stood up with such force that her chair scraped loudly against the floor. She reached out as if to grasp my hands but hesitated and quickly pulled back. Ah. I'm sorry, she said, looking down, her expression uneasy. What's wrong? I asked, puzzled. Tina glanced at her hands, then spoke hesitantly. My hands, they're so rough. It's embarrassing. Slowly, she showed them to me. Her hands bore the unmistakable marks of hard work on the farm. Calluses from handling tools, stains under her nails that wouldn't wash away despite her efforts. And countless small scars she probably didn't even remember getting. I looked at her hands intently, then gently wrapped them in mine. These are. My voice trembled with emotion. The hands of someone who truly loves what she does. The hands of someone who loves her vegetables. Tina looked up at me, surprised. Her eyes reflected a mixture of uncertainty and hope. You should never be ashamed of hands that work this hard, I said with a gentle smile. These hands are proof of your passion. They tell the story of soil you tilled, seeds you planted, water you poured, and love you nurtured. Tina stared at me, speechless. I continued. Every callus and every scar on these hands speaks volumes about how much care you've given to your vegetables. To me, these hands are incredibly beautiful. At my words, tears glimmered in Tina's eyes. Do you really mean that? Her voice trembled. Absolutely, I replied with conviction. You should never feel ashamed of them. These hands are your pride. Tina smiled shyly and slowly clasped my hands in hers. No one has ever said anything like that to me since I became a farmer. Please, come see it my farm tomorrow, if you'd like. Tea tomorrow. Yes. I'm so happy that a professional chef wants to see it. I'm so glad I took over the farm. It was as if she had cleanly forgotten what she had just been subjected to. Tina smiles a carefree, full smile. She had no idea that ever since she took my hand, I'd been aware of just how bold I had been, my heart racing uncontrollably. She's beautiful, I thought. If she could smile like this just talking about her farm, I could only imagine how dazzling she'd be introducing her vegetables under the bright sun. Yes, I'd be honored. Thank you for inviting me. Of course. From that moment, I found myself eagerly awaiting the day of the visit. A few days later, I arrived at Tina's farm, Bellwood Farm. Good morning, Simon. I've been waiting for you. Tina greeted me warmly as my car pulled up to the entrance. Her work clothes were worn and covered in dirt, evidence of daily use. But somehow, she looked far more captivating in them than she had in the rain-drenched dress from before. Good morning. It's a beautiful morning. The fields are sparkling with dew, and it looks amazing. Yes. Everything looks more beautiful than usual because today is a special day. A special day? Yes, because you're here. She beamed at me with a carefree smile. And I felt a strange sensation, as if my heart had been suddenly squeezed. The early morning air was still cool, but my face felt inexplicably warm. Now, let me show you around. Yes, please do. I stammered, snapping out of my thoughts as I hurried after her. Walking through the farm, I was immediately struck by the sight of impeccably maintained fields. No sign of weeds, just neat rows of summer vegetables at their peak. This is tomato field. I carefully manage the amount of water and sunlight they receive to balance sweetness and acidity. Wow! That's incredible. I couldn't help but voice my admiration. The large, bright red tomatoes were perfect in color, texture, and shape. Each one seemed flawless. They wouldn't look out of place on the shelves of a luxury supermarket. This is remarkable. I've never seen tomatoes this beautiful. Thank you so much. Tina replied, her smile lighting up the field around her. Tina's face lit up like the sun. Come on, let me show you the other vegetables. Wait, hold on. She was so happy to be praised for her tomatoes that she suddenly started to walk faster. With a vigor that pulled me along with her, Tina introduced me to other vegetables one after another. Zucchini, eggplant, bell peppers, corn. As we moved further into the farm, my amazement only grew. Every vegetable was thriving, perfectly cultivated, and looked absolutely delicious. This is incredible. You've been growing all of this on your own? As a chef, I've had the privilege of meeting many farmers, visiting their fields, and learning about their work. But I had never seen a farm as meticulously maintained as Bellwood Farm, nor crops as uniformly high quality as these. And knowing that such a young woman was managing it all by herself made it even more extraordinary. I'm the only one left to take care of this farm now, Tina said, her expression turning wistful. She went on to share a painful truth. 3 years ago, she lost her parents in a sudden accident. At the time, I didn't know anything about farming. I had to figure everything out from scratch. But vegetables don't wait. So I had no choice but to push through and keep trying. That must have been very hard. Yes. But this farm is something my parents left behind. When I was a child, I loved playing by their side as they harvested, tasting the fresh vegetables they picked. Those memories are so precious to me. That's why I have to protect this place, no matter what. When Tina raised her head, her eyes were filled with a strong, unwavering determination. She's beautiful, I thought, captivated by her resolute gaze. Noticing my stare, Tina squinted slightly and gave me a warm smile. As you can see, the farm isn't very big. But I do everything I can to make sure that the people who eat my vegetables are happy. That's what keeps me going every day. It's absolutely remarkable, I said, unable to hide my admiration. Looking at her farm, it was clear how much love and care she poured into her work. When I told her this, Tina looked at me with wide, surprised eyes. Really? Actually, my family also a farmer. So, I understand how much effort it takes to do what you're doing. What you've achieved here is extraordinary. Tina covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes filling with tears. Oh. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Are you okay? Did I say something wrong? I asked in a panic. No, not at all, it's just. Back at the cafe, you said such kind things to me. And now, hearing you recognize all the effort I've put in. It feels like everything I've worked for has been acknowledged and rewarded. She smiled at me through her tears. And before I realized it, my hand had settled on her shoulder. Of course. Your hard work is incredible, Tina. You should be proud of yourself, no matter what anyone says. Simon. Sorry. I quickly withdrew my hand, realizing how presumptuous I might have seemed. Tina's eyes widened slightly, and we both averted our gazes awkwardly. I'm sorry. It's okay. The silence between us felt heavy, and the tension lingered in the air of the field. Wanting to break it, I turned toward her with determination and asked loudly, "Is there anything I can do to help?" As a thank you for showing me around, let me help you with something. Anything at all? Oh, no. You've already done more than enough by complimenting the farm. She waved her hands emphatically, looking a bit flustered. Then suddenly, her expression changed. She seemed to have thought of something. Looking up at me with hesitant, hopeful eyes, she softly asked, "Then, would you mind helping me with a bit of harvesting? It's a lot for me to handle alone." Of course. When I nodded, Tina's face lit up like a sunflower in full bloom. For the rest of the morning, I helped her with the harvest. This year, we had so many sunny days that managing the water levels was tricky, but as a result, we've grown some wonderfully sweet and delicious tomatoes. She said, sharing stories of the challenges and joys of farming as we worked. Her every word overflowed with love for her vegetables, and her gentle gaze often drew my eyes away from the work at hand. Wow, it's already lunchtime. You must be tired, Simon. When the work was finished, he invited us to Tina's house near the farm, saying, "Would you like to have lunch with us?" I try to eat the vegetables that aren't fit for sale myself, since they taste just as good. If you'd like, I can whip up something simple. That sounds great. I'd love that. About 20 minutes later, the delicious aroma filling the kitchen was enough to make my stomach growl. "Tina, can you check the oven for me?" "Sure." "Oh wow, it looks amazing." She peeked into the oven, her voice full of wonder. As I plated the dish from the frying pan, I nodded in satisfaction. Despite throwing it together with what was in the fridge, it had turned out well. But still, all done. We have stuffed tomatoes, zucchini gratin, and ratatouille made with all the summer vegetables we harvested today. Wow! Tina's eyes sparkled as she looked at the vibrant dishes laid out on the table. Thank you, Simon. You helped with the farm work and even made such a luxurious lunch for me. Well, I am a chef, after all. Making lunch is just another morning warm-up. If anything. The truth was, I felt like thanking her. It had been a long time since I'd enjoyed cooking this much. Her exceptional vegetables were what made it so special. Shall we eat then? Eagerly, Tina took a bite of the gratin first. Wow! Her eyes widened in shock. This is unbelievably good. I used the same zucchini and seasonings as always, but it's completely different from what I make it. I'll take that as a compliment. Encouraged by her reaction, I took a bite myself. Whoa! I stopped, stunned. It's incredible. Right? No, it's more than I imagined. The zucchini's juiciness and lack of any bitterness paired perfectly with the creamy bechamel sauce. Believing Tina's words that our vegetables don't need any prep work, I just washed and cut them, and without a doubt, it was the best gratin I've ever made. These are amazing, Tina. The eggplant, the tomatoes, the bell peppers, not just how they look but how they taste, too. They're phenomenal. It's only because you cooked them, Simon. This is the most delicious meal I've ever had in my life. You're an amazing chef. No, it's thanks to your vegetables. We devoured the meal, barely able to stop ourselves, while chatting enthusiastically about farming and cooking. The conversation flowed so easily that we lost all sense of time. Oh, it's already this late, Tina said, suddenly noticing the clock. It was well past 1 p.m. Sorry, I didn't mean to keep you this long. I stood up, reaching for the dishes to help clean up. At that moment, our fingers brushed as we both reached for the same plate. Ah. Sorry. Tina quickly pulled her hand back, her cheeks tinged with a light blush. Noticing her reaction, I felt my face heat up as well. No, it's my fault. Thank you for the meal. Suddenly, I couldn't look her directly in the eyes. Carrying the dishes to the sink, I hurriedly excused myself and left her house, my mind swirling. Wait, Simon. Just as I was about to get into my car, Tina came running toward me, waving her hand. Simon, will you come back again? What? I had such a wonderful time today, and I'd love to see you again. Is that okay? Tina. There was no way I could say no. I shook my head and replied, of course. I'd love to help out again, as long as you'd have me. Really? Her face lit up with such joy that the image stayed with me long after. I hope I can always see her smile like this. From that day on, I started visiting Bellwood Farm 2 or 3 times a week whenever I could. We worked on the farm together, cooked lunch using her fresh vegetables, and shared stories while enjoying the meals. As time went on, the bond between us grew stronger. Summer vegetables will be done soon. Cleaning up afterward and preparing for the next crops will be a lot of work, Tina remarked one day. I'll be here to help, of course, I replied without hesitation. Really? That would be such a big help. But Simon, what about your work? Ah. Well, I think it'll work out, I said vaguely. Really? She asked, tilting her head curiously. At the time, neither of us had any idea what was happening. The restaurant that had humiliated Tina, Chateau Blanc, was facing a crisis. One that would soon spill over and bring Tina her biggest challenge yet. That day, we were busy with farm work under a gentle afternoon sun. The atmosphere calm and peaceful. Just as we were about to take a break, a phone began ringing. Huh? Who could that be? Tina pulled her phone from her pocket, her expression quickly stiffening as she looked at the screen. It's from Chateau Blanc. Do you think there's something wrong with the vegetables? As a matter of fact, Chateau Blanc had been trying to bargain down the purchase price for vegetables with some difficulty for some time. I knew that Tina had been treated badly, and I had also heard such stories. Hearing that name, I had a faint feeling of uneasiness in my heart too. Hello, this is Bellwood Farm. This is Tina speaking. She answered, taking a deep breath to steady her voice. A moment later, she exclaimed, What? Loud enough to make me jump. What do you mean? That's so sudden. Tina? Sensing something was wrong, I gently called out to her. She turned toward me, her voice trembling as she whispered, What should I do? Tina, can you put it on speaker mode? I asked cautiously. I have a bad feeling about this. I asked her in a whisper, and she hesitated for a moment and then nodded her head. She manipulated her phone. The next moment, a man's furious voice bellowed across the farm. Are you listening? I'm telling you, we're done buying your vegetables. The contract is terminated. What? The sheer volume of the shouting made even me flinch. Tina's shoulders trembled visibly. Why so suddenly? This is very troubling, she said, her voice quivering. Troubling? The only ones troubled here are us. The aggressive tone was unmistakable. The voice belonged to Mr. Reed, the current owner of Chateau Blanc. Because of you, because you dared to come to my restaurant, we're in a mess. Terminating the contract isn't enough, I'm going to sue you for damages. What are you talking about? I don't understand. What did you say? Mr. Reed heats up even more. The yelling grew louder, and Tina turned pale, her expression on the verge of breaking. Unable to bear it any longer, I gently took the phone from her trembling hands. Simon. Hello, this is Simon. I've taken over the call. And who the hell are you? I'm someone involved with Bellwood Farm. I'll hear you out from here. Involved? As far as I know, that farm only has the daughter running it. Mr. Reed's tone became slightly less aggressive, though still filled with irritation. Then, with an intimidating air, he began to explain his reasoning for severing ties with Tina's farm. That girl had the audacity to show her face at my restaurant, dragging us into this mess. She's ruined our reputation. Ruined? Social media. Some nobody uploaded a video of her being turned away, and now everyone's spreading lies online. Mr. Reed's story unraveled. Someone had secretly recorded the moment Tina was harshly turned away in the rain and uploaded it to social media. Over the past month, the video had gone viral. Other users who had visited Chateau Blanc began chiming in, posting complaints like overpriced and not as good as it used to be, and they only care about rich customers. The result was a full-blown social media scandal, with Chateau Blanc's reputation now in flames. I understand your position. However, this situation has no connection to Tina. In fact, your treatment of her warrants an apology, I said, keeping my tone even. Shut up. How dare a filthy farmer think they have the right to come to my restaurant? That girl and you're both beneath me. I never should have dealt with lowly farmers in the first place. And another thing. Her vegetables. I hated them. Not a single bite mark from insects, too perfect to be natural, it's creepy. I bet she uses pesticides so strong they're harmful to humans. If our food quality dropped, it must be because of her vegetables. What? I quickly turned off the speaker mode, but not quickly enough. Mr. Reed's cruel words had already reached Tina's ears. Tears began streaming down her face. Never come near my restaurant again. Your vegetables are garbage. I ended the call abruptly. The moment the line disconnected, Tina collapsed to the ground as if her strings had been cut. No. Tina. Simon, what should I do? She buried her face in my chest, her body shaking with sobs. Chateau Blanc. I've been supplying them since the time of the former owner, Mr. Salisbury. Even after my parents passed away and the quantity I could deliver dropped, Mr. Salisbury was kind enough to continue the contract with me. But then, Tina explained through her tears that things changed a year ago when Mr. Reed took over. He began nitpicking about the quality and quantity of the vegetables. Any attempts to defend herself were met with threats. We can cut the contract anytime we want. Now, this sudden, baseless termination of their agreement. But what truly broke her spirit wasn't just losing the contract. It was. Direct sales alone won't be enough to keep Bellwood Farm going. Maybe I was never capable of protecting it on my own. Her anguished words struck me like a dagger to the heart. To Tina, this farm wasn't just a workplace. It was a treasure trove of memories with her parents, a legacy passed down through generations. The fear of losing it was driving her to the brink of despair. I've tried so hard, she said, her voice trembling as she looked up. Tears streaked her face, but she forced a weak smile. I've gotten up early every morning, even though I hate early mornings. I've gone out to the fields no matter the rain, wind, heat, or cold. I've always worn work clothes, never dressing up, never caring about fashion. When the vegetables didn't grow well, I told myself, I'm the only one who can do this, and stayed up late studying. And still, it wasn't enough, was it? I was at a loss for words. Even in just the past month, I had seen the incredible effort she put into this farm. There was absolutely no reason for her to be treated this way. But still, I feel so defeated. Ah! Her words were the breaking point for me. That's it. I can't stay silent any longer, I said, standing abruptly. I pulled my phone from my pocket. Simon. Tina looked up at me. Startled, her tears momentarily halted. Once I confirmed she had calmed down, I dialed a familiar number. Thank you for calling. This is Reed, the owner of Chateau Blanc. The voice on the other end answered before the first ring had finished, hurried and eager. Yes, the person on the other end of the phone is the owner of Chateau Blanc, Mr. Reed, whom I was just talking to. Hello, this is Simon. Simon. Oh, it's been such a long time. The sound of Mr. Reed's voice goes up a notch. It's the so-called sycophant. The faint sound of his knuckles cracking, a habit of his when he was on edge, came through the line. I could picture him, anxiously awaiting my next words. Thank you for calling. Is there anything I can assist you with? Perhaps there's been some dissatisfaction. Yes, I'm very dissatisfied. I interrupted firmly. And because of that, I'd like to cancel my next contract with you. What? Didn't you hear me? The contract is off. I repeated, enunciating slowly. Mr. Reed fell completely silent, not a single sound came from the other end of the line. Taking advantage of the pause, I turned to Tina, who looked at me in confusion. Tina, can you search my name, Simon Courier, online? Ha! I'm sure you'll find out soon enough. I'd been interviewed quite a bit for a while. Oh, okay. Puzzled, Tina began searching on her phone. Then, right after that. What? Her eyes widened with a small cry. Simon. Is this real? She turned her phone toward me, her face a mix of shock and disbelief. On the screen was a profile highlighting the illustrious career of Simon Courier, renowned French chef. At the age of 20, he moved to France to begin his culinary training. Won numerous international cooking competitions. Became the youngest ever head chef at a Michelin-starred restaurant. Acclaimed by celebrities and notable figures. Sorry for not telling you. That's who I am. I had dreamed of becoming a chef as a child and pursued the dream against my parents' wishes by attending culinary school. Through relentless effort, I was recommended for study abroad and left for France after graduation. For 10 years, I dedicated myself entirely to training in an unfamiliar environment where I barely spoke the language. The effort paid off. And I was scouted by a Michelin-starred restaurant where I worked until recently. I returned to the US after receiving an irresistible offer from a prestigious restaurant. Why didn't you tell me? You're such an incredible person. Well, just as she was about to reveal the reason to Tina, that's when it happened. The silent Mr. Reed raised his voice, looking terribly flustered. This is unacceptable. I've already sent press releases to all the major media outlets. We've been heavily promoting your appointment as the head chef of Chateau Blanc. Yes, the offer I had accepted came from none other than Mr. Reed. As part of Chateau Blanc's 30th anniversary celebration, he had persistently begged me to join as a temporary head chef, claiming it would be the highlight of their event. Reluctantly, I had agreed, thinking it would also be an opportunity to refine my skills in French cuisine for an American audience. The announcement party is in a week. Please, tell me what's wrong, I'll do anything to fix it. Anything? Yes. Then, come to the location I specify right now. Of course. Mr. Reed immediately agreed. The location is. What? When I revealed my current location, there was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Exactly 30 minutes later, a luxury car roared onto the farm and screeched to a halt. Simon. Mr. Reed stumbled out of the car, his face pale and his legs wobbly. It was clear that he had figured it out. The lowly farmer he had insulted on the phone was connected to me. Ah! I knew it. The moment he saw Tina, the color drained further from his face. He opened and closed his mouth like a fish, utterly frozen. You asked me what I was dissatisfied with, didn't you? Do you understand now? Yes. I do. Mr. Reed nodded furiously, his eyes darting around nervously. Yet, he couldn't bring himself to say what needed to be said. Frustrated, I decided to deliver the blow myself. Good. In that case, consider my appointment as head chef cancelled. I'm sorry. Suddenly, I thought he was kneeling on the ground. The next moment, Mr. Reed became postured with his hands folded in front of his chest and began to apologize. The vegetable contract will remain. I'll ensure it continues. And Tina will be personally invited to dine in our most exclusive VIP section. Please. Simon, losing this contract would be devastating for us. I beg you. Well, watching him grovel so shamelessly, I couldn't help but smirk internally. The once overbearing Mr. Reed now looked like a completely different person. I turned to Tina, ignoring Mr. Reed's pleas. This is why. They've already issued press releases, so searching my name will lead you to articles about Chateau Blanc. I didn't want you to know I had agreed to work for someone like him. After hearing my explanation, though her expression was still one of disbelief, I see. But if I accept his apology, would you still take the position as head chef at Chateau Blanc? She looked at me hesitantly, but I shook my head firmly and replied. I refuse. Mr. Reed let out a foolish sound, his arms going limp. I cook with a firm belief in my principles. I want to create food that anyone can enjoy, savor, and feel comfortable eating. That's the reason I've honed my skills. I cannot work for a restaurant owned by someone who discriminates against others based on their occupation. It goes against everything I stand for. And I can't forgive what you said earlier either. The reason Tina's vegetables are so consistent in quality is because of her incredible effort. She minimizes pesticide use, removes pests by hand, inspects her crops meticulously every day to detect diseases early, and only delivers the very best vegetables to her customers. These are first-rate products made by a dedicated professional, someone like you, who lacks the discernment to appreciate them. Will never understand. Take it back and apologize. As I stepped closer and looked down at him, Mr. Reed began trembling violently. Then, suddenly, he shot to his feet, leaning aggressively toward me. Don't mess with me. Don't get cocky, you little brat. His face turned red with fury, veins bulging on his forehead as he screamed. Intimidated by his intense expression, I instinctively stepped back. But he immediately closed the gap again, his anger unrelenting. I moved in front of Tina, shielding her behind me. You think you can lecture me about the value of vegetables? It doesn't matter where they come from, they're all the same. I don't need your tasteless, overly perfect vegetables. Simon, you too. I'm well connected in the culinary world. A single word from me, and no one will hire you. Even if you try to open your own restaurant, you won't even be able to get a single tomato. Mr. Reed spat his threats, practically frothing at the mouth, his voice filled with misplaced triumph. In response, I remained calm. Is that so? What? Don't you understand your position? You should be the one begging me to make you head chef. Is that so? Then let's settle this however you'd like. Ha! You've got guts, I'll give you that, though you don't stand a chance. Mr. Reed smirked confidently, his arrogance on full display, but I slowly stepped closer to him and lowered my voice. Just remember, I'm also well connected in this industry. I have many influential food critics and respected figures in my corner. Ah! As I whispered those words, Mr. Reed froze, the color draining from his face. I knew why he wanted me as head chef. He was desperate for a Michelin star, which had eluded Chateau Blanc under his leadership. I had hit him where it hurt most, and his bluster quickly deflated. Just you wait. He stammered before storming off to his car and speeding away. As I watched him leave, I felt a gentle tug on my sleeve. I didn't want someone like that buying my precious vegetables anyway. Thanks to you, Simon, I feel so much better. But this means Bellwood Farm might really be in trouble now. I nodded to Tina, who gently lowered her eyes, and I nodded to her and said, "It's okay. Don't worry. I have an idea. And I think you'll like it." An idea? Shortly after, news broke through various media outlets. A world-famous chef cancels appointment as head chef at prestigious restaurant. Fans eagerly awaiting my cooking in the US expressed their disappointment, and there was backlash against me as well. At first, the media painted Chateau Blanc as the victim. Are you sure about this, Simon? Don't worry. Just wait a little longer. I was optimistically going about my day-to-day life as usual. Then, after about a month, they were using rotten vegetables. A doorman who couldn't stand Mr. Reed's antics admits it's true, bribing food critics to attract customers with false and highly rated articles. In contrast to the quelling of public bashing of the chef, the truth, which the owner had been suppressing by any means possible, began to erupt and was reported one after another. The staff's dissatisfaction had been growing since the new owners took over, due to their arrogant attitude and unreasonable cost-cutting. The owner of the restaurant told them, "We have changed our suppliers. So you chefs and servers have to do something to keep the customers from finding out about the inferior and bad-tasting vegetables." The staff, who had been working with pride, finally exploded in frustration and leaked the truth to the media as if competing with each other. And I wanted to stand up for my beliefs. I will never regret it, even if it means being ostracized from the culinary world. The timing of the publication of the article on the chef who so boldly stated this may have been the coup de grace for the owner. Chateau Blanc has a rattled reputation. Mr. Reed, in particular, was the culprit behind the cancellation fiasco and was bashed even more than the chef. On the other hand, Simon, I'm adding a seasonal salad and soup set. Got it. This one's ready to go. I'll take it out. The lively exchange between the chef and the staff in the kitchen blended seamlessly with the cheerful conversations of the diners. This is our farm-to-table restaurant, built on a section of Bellwood Farm and dedicated to showcasing the incredible vegetables Tina grows. Offering fresh, farm-picked vegetables transformed into delicious and healthy dishes, the restaurant has quickly gained a reputation. In just 6 months since opening, it's been fully booked nearly every day. Thank you. Thanks to you, Simon, I've been able to protect Bellwood Farm. And look, it's the most wonderful feeling to see people enjoying what I've worked so hard to grow. Tina narrowed her eyes as she watched the halls where everyone was smiling and enjoying the vegetables. She is more than happy to see people enjoying the vegetables she has painstakingly produced. Her expression tells the story. So I couldn't help but smile as well. Let's open a restaurant together. I am so glad I suggested that. The cancellation fiasco also brought about an unexpected publicity effect, and many people from far and wide are coming to visit. For the time being, it looks like we will be very busy with farm work and running the restaurants. Incidentally, behind our success, Chateau Blanc, which continued to lose customers, quietly went bankrupt before we knew it. The owner of Mr. Reed was saddled with huge debts, and was to lead a life of being looked down upon wherever he went. Tina, I need to talk to you, I said one evening after we had closed up for the day. I had called her out to the terrace. "What is it?" "You're being so serious," she asked with a gentle smile. Her kind expression made my heart race. When she stood beside me, I took a deep breath and began. "Tina, I love you." "What?" She froze, her eyes widening in shock. Beneath the starry sky, her cheeks turned a deep shade of red. "I've wanted to tell you for so long, but I couldn't find the right moment, or the courage. I kept putting it off, and now, finally." Tina stared at me for a long moment, then averted her gaze. I've loved you for a long time too, Simon." "Really?" I asked, almost disbelieving. "Yes. But I thought someone like me could never be good enough for you." "What?" "World-famous chef and simple farmer. I thought the gap between us was too wide, so I tried to give up on my feelings." She gave me a sad smile, her voice tinged with self-doubt. "Simon deserves a more suitable partner." "No, that's not true." I grasped her hands tightly, surprising her. I looked straight into her surprised eyes and pleaded my feelings. "Tina, I've always felt the opposite." "What do you mean?" "Well," I explained how, as the eldest son of a farming family, I had chosen not to inherit the farm and instead pursued a career in cooking. Perhaps that was a debt somewhere in my heart. No matter how much success he achieved in the culinary world, the thought of what if I had taken over the family business never went away. At that time, meeting you and helping out on the farm. At first, I wondered if it was my way of trying to make up for that guilt. I worried that I was using you to fill a void I couldn't deal with myself. "Simon." But still, I couldn't give up. I kept talking. "What drew me to you was your unwavering dedication to farming. The way you pour your heart into growing the best vegetables, never cutting corners. Always thinking about the people who will enjoy your produce. That strength captivated me. By the time I realized it, I had fallen completely in love with you." Hands worn and calloused from farm work, covered in small cuts and blisters, yet they were the gentlest hands in the world. I took those hands, which I thought were the most beautiful in the world, and held them again, softly. "Tina, you're the best farmer in the world. Someone like me, still learning, isn't worthy of someone as amazing as you." "Simon." Before I realized it, Tina pulled her hands away, but only to throw her arms around me, embracing me tightly. In the cold night air, I felt a warm sensation spreading across my back. It was the warmth of Tina's hands. I want to grow even better vegetables. I still have so much to learn." "Then we're the same." "Yes, so stay with me, always." That was her reply to my confession. Her tearful smile stirred something deep within me, filling my chest with warmth. "Of course, forever," I promised, my voice catching with emotion. To the woman in my arms, I vowed to always stay by her side, no matter what the future held. "And I will, too. No matter what, I'll always be with you, Simon," she whispered, reaching her hand toward me with a tender smile. I pulled her close once more, holding her tighter than before. The countless stars above us seemed to watch over our exchange, shining gently as if blessing us. Life changes through unexpected encounters. I once thought my path was only in cooking. But meeting Tina, someone who faces farming with such dedication, led me to embrace both cooking and agriculture as my way of life. If you ever find yourself lost in life, take a moment to look around. You'll find someone living their life with a radiance so bright that it inspires you to step forward on the path you truly want to take. Just having that person nearby will naturally guide you to look ahead. And one day, you too might live in a way that encourages someone else to keep moving forward. "Unless you increase our salaries fivefold, we're all quitting." "Oh, is that so?" I muttered those words to myself. For the past year, I had tolerated their nonsense, but this level of obliviousness, or rather sheer audacity, was far worse than I'd imagined. I never thought I'd see such immaturity from adults. I understand that some people are adults in age but children in mind. These three are prime examples. The real problem is that they excel academically. With impressive degrees and strong connections, they slid into this company without a hitch. It's not that I disregard education or connections. They're valuable assets, after all. If we have them, we use them. The biggest issue is that these three are so stuck in their own worldview. Frankly, wasting more time and energy on them feels utterly foolish. Yet ignoring the situation won't help the company either. Most importantly, my subordinates are being held back by these three. As their boss, it's my responsibility to step in and lead. They need to learn the world doesn't revolve around them, and people don't just bend to their whims. Since I am their boss in a manner of speaking, I guess I need to teach them that. To be honest, I don't want to deal with this. Teaching brats like these is a headache, but I have no choice. Having these three dumped in my department a year ago was nothing short of bad luck. My name is Carter. I'm a 42-year-old, average company employee and manager of Section 2 in the development department. It's been 18 years since I joined Dale Industries. My childhood was anything but smooth sailing. When I entered junior high, my father quit his job to start his own business, a decision that wiped out nearly all of our savings. Of course, it failed. What success could you expect from someone with no business knowledge or training? It was my mother, a full-time housewife until then, who rose to the challenge. She found work and carried our family on her shoulders with sheer determination. Her resolve to support us shone so brightly that even as a child, I was moved. Eventually, my father picked himself back up after seeing her example and found a position at a small company. By the time I was preparing for college entrance exams, our family's finances had stabilized. Thanks to that, I managed to get into college. That experience taught me some important lessons. To understand your abilities. Not to reach for things beyond your means. But never stop growing and improving yourself. Some people mocked me, saying I lacked ambition. But I've always believed that ambition isn't something to throw around casually, but it's something you show when it truly matters. Just like my mother did when she started working to support us. The whole ordeal with these three began 2 years ago, when they were assigned to Section 2 in the development department. With Section 2 always short-staffed, we were thrilled to have 3 new recruits. After completing their training, we assumed they'd be ready to contribute. How wrong we were. The 3 of them turned out to be troublemakers, shocking everyone from day one. On their very first day, they introduced themselves to me with shocking arrogance. We're graduates of Stanford University, so we're top talent. You'd better watch out or we'll surpass you in no time. Caden, who seemed to be the ringleader, delivered this line so confidently that I was momentarily speechless. When people say something so far beyond the scope of normal behavior, it's hard to react. Caden must have mistaken my silence for intimidation because he smiled brightly and added, "Don't worry. We'll go easy on you. I mean, Carter, you're probably just some local college graduate, right? It's amazing you even made it to manager." I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. Did this kid even realize what he was saying? Do they not even understand that this isn't something you say to your manager? I probably looked completely dumbfounded, but they didn't seem to notice. The 3 of them walked away with a spring in their step as if to say, "We really showed him with that opening strike." On their backs, I could almost see the words, "We're so cool for speaking our minds to the boss on day one." But what I saw instead was idiots. The one I truly felt sorry for was my subordinate of 3 years, whom I had assigned as their mentor. I went back and reread their resumes. Graduated from Stanford University with honors, huh? Most graduates from prestigious universities go on to accomplish impressive things in their careers. But among them, there are always a few entitled fools who think too highly of themselves. Sure, they have pride in their education, but does that mean they can perform at the level of that pride? That's a whole other story. On top of that, It didn't look like any of them had ever applied themselves to anything meaningful. They're perfect examples of privileged, sheltered kids. And here they are, flaunting that privilege. I couldn't help but wonder what HR was thinking when they hired these three. After I asked my fellow colleague in HR, it didn't take long to find out. Caden was the nephew of Max, the senior vice president. So it was nepotism. Caden got in, and his entourage followed suit. I let out a sigh. A new hire's role is the same at any company. They are placed in entry-level positions and gradually learn the job. So it takes some time for them to be able to work on their own. But Caden didn't seem to understand this. "Excuse me, how long do you intend to keep us on these pointless tasks? Do you even know what the right person for the right job means? Isn't this a waste of our talent?" A week after his assignment, he came up to my desk and puffed his chest out. Behind him, of course, followed by two of his cronies. "Why not give these menial tasks to people from lower-ranked colleges or those who haven't achieved anything significant? Surely, Stanford graduates like us shouldn't be doing work like that." In a reasonably clear voice, he said it without an ounce of shame. So everyone in the development department heard the word. Half of the room is beyond aghast and decides to pretend they don't hear it. The rest of the room doesn't even try to hide their anger. They are glaring at the backs of the three of them with horrified eyes. If those eyes had been lasers, there would have been countless holes in the backs of the three of them long ago. However, the three of them, who overestimated themselves, could not possibly perceive such an atmosphere, and they were unperturbed. How insensitive. It should not be my role to educate these people on common sense. That said, as they're my subordinates, I have a certain level of responsibility. I resent being told by people in other departments that I don't know how to educate my subordinates. What kind of work do you want to do? Do you have any good ideas? Caden's face lit up as if he'd been waiting for this question. According to them, having graduated from Stanford University with high honors, it would be a waste for them to work just to be used by someone else. It's obvious that the role of leading the team is the right one for us. Project leader is the right job for us. At this, I nearly sighed out loud. What I had asked was clear. I meant what specific part of development work they want to take on. I asked if they had any concrete ideas worth discussing. And yet, all he said was that he wanted to be the leader. He had no clear vision, no actionable plan, and just an empty desire for a title. This makes them full-blown useless. What can I do with people who don't even have a clear vision for their work? Especially here, in the development section. This department is meant to be a pioneer, breaking into new fields. What kinds of products will succeed in the future? What's needed? Where's the demand? We share ideas based on these questions and move forward toward product development. It is such a department. And yet, these three who haven't even mastered the basics are demanding to be project leaders? Carter, don't disappoint us, okay? I was already beyond disappointed. God! Someone, please take my place as manager. My other subordinates must have sensed my frustration. They shot me pitying looks before pointedly turning away as if to say, "Nope, don't look at us, this one's all you." I had drawn the short straw, no doubt about it. I decided to think of these three as children. Like they are preschoolers, to be precise. Small children live in a world that revolves around themselves. They don't see the people or things around them. They are unable to read the current situation. And when things don't go their way, they throw tantrums. That's what these guys were. Okay, they didn't literally cry and scream, but they might as well have. Every single day, they loudly complain things like, "It's unbearable to work under an ignorant manager who doesn't recognize our value. I can't believe everyone here just puts up with it. Oh, that's right. If you're worthless, you can't say anything, can you?" They even spoke rudely to veteran employees and seemed to treat female co-workers like mothers or housekeepers. Naturally, no one could stand them anymore, and they were shunned by the entire office. But these three didn't notice a thing. I never imagined they could be so oblivious, so self-centered. If this went on any longer, it would seriously affect team morale. They kept pestering me about real work, so I appointed Caden as project chief for a minor assignment. Of course, he was just a figurehead. I discreetly asked a capable senior female colleague to handle things behind the scenes. Sorry to ask, but you're the best person for this. I'll make it up to you later. She gave me a look of sympathy and said, if I can help you even a little, I'll do my best. Thanks to her and the rest of the team, the project was completed successfully. Caden and his entourage proudly claimed the credit, of course. But no one took them seriously. Everyone knew the truth that they'd been humored and kept out of the way. The female colleague and team members were already in on the plan. The only ones unaware were the Three Stooges themselves. After the project ended, I checked with the senior colleague about another small task I'd entrusted to her. So, how did that matter go? Oh, they said something absolutely fatal. Even I didn't expect them to go that far. She smiled and added, I sent the file to you, by the way. I thanked her again. Time passed, the fiscal year ended, and the salary review meetings wrapped up. Many of my subordinates received significant raises. Except for Caden and his two sidekicks. This is ridiculous, Carter. You mean to tell me we're not getting raises? After we made that project a success? This is negligence on your part. There's no way those other useless team members could have done it without us. I didn't say anything, just sighed, and Caden stuck his tongue out and turned himself around. Then the next morning, Caden and two of his cronies came up to my desk with their resignation letter and said, "This is our final ultimatum. If you don't increase our salaries fivefold, we're all quitting. Losing us such talented individuals would be an immeasurable loss for the company. You'll probably lose your job too. Just so you know. My uncle is Max, the senior vice president. Are you really willing to go against the executives?" I guess they thought I was freaked out when I stared at them in dismay, wondering what that was all about. Caden continued his assertion in a pompous manner. My college friends at other companies couldn't believe it when I shared project details. They all said, "Why haven't you been promoted yet?" The entire department froze, and so did I. Did he just say he shared project details with people from other companies? Surely, he knows about confidentiality agreements. I could only imagine the shock of the people he spoke to. Who in their right mind would blurt out what is essentially corporate secrets to outsiders? This kid is beyond help. I had tried to manage the situation, but this was the last straw. Behavior like this could jeopardize the company itself. I didn't want to do it, but there was no other choice. I stared at the three of them and picked up the resignation letters from my desk. Understood. Ignoring them, I opened the internal email app, sent a quick message, and then stood up. Leaving the development room, I walked straight to the president's office. After greeting his secretary, I was led inside. The president, Mr. Kessler, welcomed me with a smile but quickly asked, "What's this all about?" I explained the situation briefly, and predictably Mr. Kessler's face contorted like he'd bitten into something sour. He muttered, "Well, we'll have to accept all three resignations, then." "Of course, but I think leaving them unsupervised for now could be dangerous." Mr. Kessler thought for a moment, then nodded. "You're right," he said, and instructed his secretary to summon Caden and his entourage. Mr. Kessler suggested I sit on the couch, but I dared to stand and wait for them. Before long, Caden and his two cronies strutted in, puffing their chests like peacocks. "We heard you wanted to see us, sir, so we came right away." Their faces practically screamed. The president finally recognized our success, take that. But Mr. Kessler's face remained stony, and he said nothing. They must have thought, when they saw Mr. Kessler just standing there watching them. The eyes of the three of them wander around. They were like children expecting praise, only to realize they'd been called in to be scolded. Then Caden's wandering gaze found me, and his expression twisted again. "Carter, what are you doing in the president's office? Don't you think you're out of place?" "Oh, I get it. You're trying to cover up your own failures by badmouthing us to Mr. Kessler, aren't you?" I suppressed a sigh. Mr. Kessler, however, didn't bother to hide his exasperation. He let out a heavy sigh and finally spoke. "Caden, do you even realize what you've done?" The three of them looked confused. Caden spoke up. "Mr. Kessler, whatever he told you, it's just jealousy. This man is only good at cozying up to management. And for the record, I was hired because of Max's recommendation. He's my uncle, you know. A proud Stanford graduate like me was always destined to join this company." Caden's smug face made Mr. Kessler's expression darken even further. "So, you're saying that I, the company president, am a fool who's been manipulated by someone cozying up to me?" Caden finally realized he had stepped in it. He stammered, trying to explain himself. I hesitated but decided it was time to step in. "You've repeatedly done and said things that cross every line. The biggest issue here is that you can't even distinguish between what's acceptable and unacceptable, and worse, you're not even aware of it. What the hell? A manager from some third-rate college dares to lecture me?" At this, Mr. Kessler said quietly, "Carter graduated from Harvard University's graduate school." The looks on their faces were priceless, utter disbelief like children caught misbehaving. It was almost sad. Yes, I had gone to Harvard University for graduate studies. My professor had practically begged me to stay on for research, and my parents had encouraged it, so I went. But after graduating, I didn't stay in academia. I turned down my professor's offer and joined this company instead. An economist's life isn't as glamorous as it sounds. It's not exactly a field you can rely on to put food on the table. In the real world, academic credentials don't matter nearly as much as your attitude toward work. That's what counts as a professional and as a human being." Seeing Caden and his friends clinging so desperately to their degrees, I almost felt sorry for them. At that moment, the door to the president's office burst open, and in stormed a stout, well-built man who looked to be in his 60s. It was Max. To me, he was someone far above the clouds, a figure I'd never directly interacted with because we worked in completely separate spheres. I knew his face, of course. But I never imagined he'd have a nephew like Caden. If anything, I'd heard Max was the cautious, meticulous type who always thought things through. The moment he entered, he barked at his nephew. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Are you trying to disgrace me?" When Mr. Kessler informed me of this, I was so shocked I nearly fell out of my chair. Caden shook his head in denial and tried to placate Max. "Please, relax. This is all a trap. Mr. Kessler and you are both being deceived by him." He jabbed his finger toward me and shouted, "This guy is sabotaging us because he can't handle his own responsibilities. He's a disgrace. Someone so incompetent he has to drag down talented elites like us." Max hesitated for a moment. I couldn't blame him. It's natural to want to believe his nephew. I had also heard that Max had a strong bias toward family. I glanced over at Mr. Kessler. He let out yet another deep sigh before speaking. "Max, I understand that you want to believe in your nephew. But I, too, want to believe in my son-in-law." The room went silent. I simply shrugged. Yes. Mr. Kessler was my father-in-law. His daughter had worked here as a regular employee 18 years ago, under an assumed name, for the sake of learning about society. I joined the company at the same time as her and we met at a social event for unmarried employees and hit it off. When I proposed to her, I had no idea she was the president's daughter. Only then did I find out who she really was. When I did, I told her, "I want to marry you, not the president's daughter." Her face lit up as she replied, That's exactly why I fell in love with you. Everyone else only saw the company and its power behind me. No one ever saw me. Mr. Kessler had said that if I was a man who could see his daughter for who she was, then he could trust me to take care of her. Within the company, I've always been just another employee. I earned my role as a manager through my own abilities, nothing more. Still, having my connection to Mr. Kessler revealed at a moment like this left me with mixed feelings. It felt like I was tricking everyone into thinking I had more influence than I actually did. Honestly, I hate that kind of thing, but using my connection might be the simplest way to resolve this mess. Caden, however, wasn't done. So that's it. Carter is a spy for Mr. Kessler. He's trying to frame us, and yes, I see it now. He's planning to take my uncle's place as senior vice president. Max turned to look at Mr. Kessler, then at me. His gaze was trembling with uncertainty. I understood how he felt. People cling to their positions because it's human nature. When forced to choose between ideals and reality, reality often wins. It's a tool for survival. But this misunderstanding couldn't be allowed to fester. If this continues, Mr. Kessler may be under strange suspicion. I don't want people to misunderstand that we are trying to trick Max and make me, his daughter-in-law, an executive. I had no choice but to counter trickery with trickery. I reached for my phone and pressed a button. A voice echoed through the room. Tasks like this should be left to people from lower-ranked schools or those who haven't achieved anything significant. Stanford graduates like us shouldn't have to do menial work, should we? Then tell me, what kind of work do you want to do? It's obvious, isn't it? Leading a team. Being a project leader is the job that suits us best. This is our final ultimatum. Unless you increase our salaries fivefold, we're all quitting. Losing talented people like us would be an immeasurable loss for the company. You'll probably lose your job too. Just so you know, my uncle is the senior vice president here. Are you really willing to go against an executive? Moments like this are when the recording feature on a phone becomes truly invaluable. I queued up another audio file I'd been given by the female colleague I had quietly placed as the real leader of their project. It was a recording from one of their project meetings. What are you all whining about? Consumers are idiots anyway. We just need to manipulate them into buying what we want. If we're making cheap private label products, then just use cheap materials. Why bother seriously calculating production costs? That's a waste of time. If you buy cheap materials in bulk, you'll get a better deal. And if there's any excess, just throw it away. Be more efficient. Honestly, you people are useless. The recording played out in the dead silence of the president's office. Mr. Kessler's eyes sharpened dangerously. His business philosophy is to provide high-quality and affordable private label products for consumers without focusing solely on profits. He constantly reminds his employees of this in his instructions. Business isn't about just making a profit. Our customers must thrive as well. That's how true success works. No doubt this especially angered Mr. Kessler. Max, standing off to the side, seemed to shrink further into himself. He was one of the senior executives who had helped Mr. Kessler build this company from the ground up. So he knew that philosophy better than anyone. Watching him bow his head and shake it slowly was almost painful. However, Caden did not even look around and try to make a last stand. Recording us like that. That's sneaky and underhanded. Max finally looked up, glaring at Caden. His face was bright red. He is so angry and embarrassed that he is at a loss for words. Even Caden seemed to realize he'd pushed too far and clamped his mouth shut. I really need to check Max's blood pressure later, I thought absent-mindedly. After a moment, Max seemed to compose himself. He turned to me, grabbed me firmly by the shoulders, and spoke with deep regret. I'm so sorry, this is entirely my fault. I let my nephew run wild, and I take full responsibility. It's not something you should blame yourself for, I assured him. Mr. Kessler had chosen Max as an executive for a reason. He was fundamentally a good man. He had simply let his affection for his family cloud his judgment. But he had the humility to admit his mistakes and take responsibility, something that spoke volumes about his character. Max put another gulp into his hand that gripped my shoulder before turning to Caden and the others. As expected, Caden and the others seemed to realize that there was no escape now. Without a word, they turned their eyes to Max as if they were hanging on to him. They just didn't seem to understand what was wrong with them yet. I guess Max understood that as well. He spoke out of anger that had nowhere to go. "You're all fired." Mr. Kessler plugged his ears with his fingers at Max's roar. And I once again found myself worrying about his blood pressure. Caden and his cronies stood frozen, still wearing clueless expressions as though they hadn't yet understood what had just happened. Max's anger was justified. Firing them, too, seemed like the natural course of action. But the situation was a little more complicated than that. "Max, I understand how you feel, but outright firing them might not be the best solution." Max stared at me in surprise. "Why not?" "Think about it. If the new hires brought in under your recommendation are publicly fired instead of resigning voluntarily, it'll start unnecessary rumors. On top of that, if they're cast out now, their resumes will still carry this company's name. That could ultimately hurt the company's reputation." Max looked at me, then shifted his gaze toward Mr. Kessler. Mr. Kessler nodded in agreement as if to say, "He's absolutely right." "Then what do you suggest we do?" Max asked me. "They're spoiled, overconfident brats who've only ever lived in their heads. How about restarting them from the ground up in the field?" Mr. Kessler let out a small chuckle, while Max nodded thoughtfully. Caden and his two sidekicks still stood there dumbfounded, unable to keep up with the conversation. I advocated getting them out in the field and training them. I sent 3 of them to a major supermarket operated by this company. I asked the site manager to let them do all kinds of work, from carrying loads to taking out products to cleaning. The only condition is that they are not allowed to interact with customers. The manager, someone who had worked his way up from the ground, pounded his chest and said, "Leave it to me." Max took it further and informed Caden's family, as well as the families of the other 2. He requested that no financial or personal aid be provided until the 3 of them shaped up. Caden's parents were shocked. They couldn't believe their son had acted so disgracefully. They pleaded with Max to help mold him into a proper adult. The same request came from the other 2 families. My brother and his wife are sensible people, but it seems they spoiled their son far too much. They overdid it. No wonder Caden turned out the way he did. As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together, and the other 2 simply followed his lead. Currently, the 3 of them are working in the back rooms of the supermarket, doing physical labor like moving stock and lifting crates. The very people they once looked down on as ordinary folks are now yelling at them to do real work if they can't contribute in any other way. They've also been kicked out of their homes, and all their credit cards have been suspended. Out of sheer pity, Max found them a shared apartment, where they now split the rent and living expenses. Their incomes are barely above minimum wage, so they're scraping by. I can only hope this hardship teaches them a valuable lesson and turns them into functional members of society. As for me, life has returned to its usual rhythm. I go to work, complete my tasks without fuss, and head home. My wife, who works shorter hours, comes home first and greets me with the kids. The one change is that I no longer work overtime. Because my wife is not feeling very well and needs me to prepare meals and do the housework. Our 3rd child is due next year. We need to make some more adjustments in the allocation of household responsibilities. Still, Mr. Kessler hasn't stopped his attempts to rope me into taking over the company. "You truly are the man I believed you to be. Isn't it time you accepted that you're meant to succeed me? But I'm just an ordinary manager, an average guy with a wife I love and soon to be 3 kids. That's more than enough for me. It's all I can handle. I'm not interested in carrying more than I can hold. I'm sorry to Mr. Kessler for giving me too much credit, but I'm going to stick to this one. I can organize one section, but the general manager of the company is too much for me. I still haven't forgotten what I swore at the beginning of my life. I will not do a job that is too big for me. That's exactly why I love you so much. That's what my wife tells me. And honestly, that's all I need. For the sake of my family and our future, I'll keep my feet firmly planted on the ground and move forward, one steady step at a time. Useless people have no place here. Just before the presentation, I had been suddenly assigned. That's what was written in the text sent to my phone. Travis, the department manager who sent this, clearly doesn't care about the company at all. He's probably only focused on belittling the people he dislikes. Because Travis hates me, he's using this opportunity to embarrass and crush me. However, I can't afford to mess up here and cause damage to the company. Determined, I gather my composure and start introducing the product with the appropriate language for the situation. Fortunately, I managed to pull it off, but I can't just let Travis have his way. I had already put a certain plan into motion. Soon enough, those items I entrusted to several people would come in handy. Thinking of that moment, I quietly keep recording data for my eventual retaliation. My name is Matthew, and I turned 33 this year. What I like are efficient work and harmonious relationships with my colleagues. I value connections with people and have always interacted with many others since my school days. By talking to people from different backgrounds, I learned diverse perspectives and ways of thinking, which have been incredibly helpful in my current job. However, close colleagues have often asked me about it with curiosity. Matthew, why do you work so hard? Everyone else leaves on time. To that, I always reply, well, pretending to be someone I'm not is just stressful and a waste of time. Doing what I want to do is way more fun. At the time, I think I could say something like that because I was young and didn't know much about the world. I hadn't considered that many people have circumstances that prevent them from asserting what they want. Still, I don't regret saying those words. Because, by saying them, I ended up meeting many like-minded people. I see, Matthew, that's pretty admirable. Maybe I'll try to find others who want to work harder too. If I said something like that now as an adult, it probably wouldn't work out the same way. Back then, we were young, and we happened to be surrounded by understanding people, so things turned out well. Matthew, I found so many people who shares the same value. 5 people. That's amazing. Alright, from now on, we're a team with the same vision. From that day on, we talked about our ideals regardless of our departments or positions. We exchanged new ideas and taught others efficient ways to work. Those accumulated memories are the essential foundation of who I am today. Currently, I work for a major company with a global presence. It's a company with top-tier achievements in the industry and one that many people admire. Whenever I introduce myself and say I work there, people are always surprised. But recently, I've had a bit of a problem with a particular newcomer who keeps calling me incompetent. Even small mistakes lead to long lectures, and it's been bothering me. June brought the rainy season. The gloomy weather that had lingered for so long suddenly gave way to a clear, brilliant sky stretching above us. As I stared at the bright sky and headed to work, I stepped into the sales office only to hear Travis's shouting voice. I sighed, thinking, here we go again. Why can't you get something this simple done quickly? Everyone else manages just fine. You're unbelievably slow. That's Travis, the department manager, berating one of the colleagues. Travis is a man in his 30s who recently transferred to the sales department. Wearing an expensive suit, a luxury wristwatch, and a gleaming wedding ring, he looks like the epitome of success. His desk reflects the same image, cluttered with high-end stationery and the latest tablet devices. Even the small ornaments tucked into the corner are flashy, covered in golden embellishments that feel out of place in the office. Travis lashes out at his subordinates over the smallest annoyances. Most of all, his insults are especially sharp when results don't meet his expectations. I promised Mr. Stevens I would do a proper job as department manager. If my subordinates are incompetent, they'll just drag me down. Useless people aren't needed here. Get back to work. The colleague being scolded apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry," before quickly returning to his desk. Oomph, young people like that shouldn't even bother joining this company. They'd have been better off somewhere else. Still fuming, Travis turned his attention to me as well. "Hey, you! Useless employee. Stop standing around and get back to work. Time is limited, you know." "Yes, sir." Not wanting to endure yet another long lecture, I quietly returned to my desk. Watching the exhausted colleague, I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. I walked up to the colleague and tapped them on the shoulder. "Rough day, huh? This isn't much, but have it during your break." I handed him an energy bar I had stashed in my pocket and returned to my seat. It's not something to brag about, but I know most of my colleagues' preferences pretty well. After working here for over 10 years, it's only natural. That's why I always carry small snacks in my pocket to help out my colleagues in times of need. This might help for now, but it's still just a temporary fix. There are several other colleagues who've also been pushed to the edge by Travis's constant berating. This situation needs to be resolved sooner rather than later. While I was thinking about that, I didn't even notice that Travis was watching me. A notification buzzed on my phone as I continued my work. It was a text from Mr. Stevens. Puzzled, I began reading the message. Later that day, after speaking with Mr. Stevens in the conference room, I decided to carry a small recording device in the pocket of my suit jacket. A few days later, I discreetly keep a recorder in my chest pocket while working in another department's office. The place where I currently work is the Overseas Business Department. Here, several team members had gone on maternity leave around the same time, leaving the department severely understaffed. Because it wasn't a great time to hire new colleagues, they decided to bring in experienced help from other departments, me, in this case. I'd helped out here a few times before, so I knew I could be of some use. Glad to have you on board. I trust you more than others, Matthew, and you're already somewhat familiar with how things work here. Tiffany, a woman in her 30s who welcomed me warmly. Understood. I'll be in your care for a while. Because I'd helped this team before, their reaction to me joining was fairly calm. Blending in naturally, I dove into my tasks, working hard to fill in where help was most needed. But that wasn't the only reason I was here. Actually, I'd been secretly assigned a mission by Mr. Stevens. It is to investigate Travis's problematic behavior. I must have angered Travis somehow. When I was informed of my transfer to the Overseas Business Division, he had looked at me with a smug grin. Before moving, he'd also dumped far more grunt work on me than usual. I'm certain it wasn't just my imagination. As I sorted through documents, half occupied with these thoughts, another colleague spoke up. "Are you doing okay, Matthew? If you need anything, please don't hesitate to ask." "I'm fine, really. With things as hectic as they are, any help you can give us is a huge relief." "Thank you. I'll make sure to reach out if I need anything." I had only stopped working because I was lost in thought, but I still felt a little embarrassed. I need to focus and get back to work to avoid becoming a burden to others. Almost as if she had read my mind, Tiffany spoke up. "You were just deep in thought, weren't you? How are you doing? Managing okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks to your support, I'm getting by." I really appreciate it. Tiffany is a colleague my age, also in her 30s. We joined the company at the same time and have been working together as peers ever since. We understand each other well but maintain an appropriate level of professionalism at work. Since our early days as new colleagues, we've seen a lot together, both at work and outside it. After years of sharing struggles and successes as peers, we've come to understand each other's personalities and working styles deeply. Unfortunately, we're now in different departments, but after more than a decade at the same company, we both have a good sense of how each other's teams operate. Of course, only within the limits that do not violate confidentiality. If there's something you're unsure of, talk to Melissa or Kevin, okay? If you need help organizing documents, Samuel is your guy. And if it's technical jargon, George knows it inside out. Perfect. Sounds like you know exactly who to go to. Tiffany clapped her hands with an amused smile on her face. You're in a good mood today. What's up? Well, remember that overseas company I've been reaching out to for ages? It looks like they're finally interested in our products. They want us to give them a presentation soon. Our company had long been trying to negotiate with a major American corporation, but talks had never quite materialized. Recently, though, it seemed like they were beginning to consider the deal, so the overseas business division was abuzz with excitement. I don't know the details, but good luck. Of course. If I need any help, I'll let you know, so be ready. I don't think there'll ever be a situation where we'd need just an extra hand. I look at Tiffany, amused yet fond, as she enthusiastically gets ready. Tiffany has always been a forward thinker, unafraid to take on challenges and push boundaries. She's never concerned about department lines and frequently proposes ideas to benefit the company as a whole. Lately, she's been advocating for developing new products aimed at overseas markets. Unlike Travis, Tiffany never looks down on people because of their age or experience. Honestly, I've often wished Travis could learn a thing or two from her. With that thought, I refocused on my work, putting my skills to use by organizing English language materials. I returned completed files to their shelves. Ideally, everyone would put files back properly after using them, but when things get busy or when someone's distracted, mistakes happen. It's a task that needs regular attention, and for someone like me, stepping in as a temporary helper, it's the perfect job. As I concentrated, Travis suddenly entered the Overseas Business Division office. He approached Michael, the department head. I came to check on my colleague. Mind if I walk around a bit? No, go right ahead. Even though Michael was older, he didn't seem to be able to stand up to Travis. I promised Mr. Stevens I'd do a proper job as department manager. If my subordinates are useless, they'll just drag me down. I don't know whose words were murmured in that moment. For me, it wasn't the speaker but what was said that caught my attention. The moment Travis showed up, murmurs of dissatisfaction started to ripple through the office. I couldn't help but overhear snippets of their comments as I worked, mentally taking notes. It's unfair. He became manager through connections, not skill. Now he's wasting time walking around other departments. I heard Michael can't stand up to him because Travis has something on him. I feel bad for anyone stuck working under that guy. I'd always felt there was something off about Travis. His rise to the position of department manager at such a young age had struck me as odd, so these murmurs only confirmed my suspicions. While I mulled over these thoughts, I turned and realized, to my surprise, that Travis had gotten much closer to me than I'd expected. Grinning smugly, he walked right up to where I was sitting. Looks like you're fitting in here nicely. Sending you here as a helper was the right call after all. Is that so? I struggled to find the right words, and my face must have looked tense with nerves. But Travis, of course, misinterpreted it entirely. You seem to be struggling, so I'll have you stay here for a while. Do your best. He assumed my expression was because I couldn't keep up with the work here. Even without Travis asking, I intend to work hard because I don't want to trouble my kind and supportive colleagues. Oh, by the way, everyone here graduated from top-tier universities. Since you're from a third-tier university, you must feel out of place. But don't even think about running away. Hearing those words, I felt something unsettling about what Travis had said. A third-tier university? Where did you hear that? The other day, I saw one of your colleagues drunk at a bar and got quite a bit out of them. I get it, having a mediocre academic background might make someone want to hide their incompetence. But keeping track of this kind of information is part of a department head's job. Don't take it personally. It was likely the alcohol talking, loose lips, and muddled memories. I didn't actually graduate from a third-tier university, but I figured it might cause trouble if I were called a liar or something. So I decided to keep my real background hidden. I may end up being labeled as incompetent while keeping my background hidden, but since I'm working in the overseas business department now, I'm fine with that. Satisfied with my silence, Travis smirked and left the room. After that, I was assigned a certain business negotiation by Michael. It was with the major American corporation Tiffany had mentioned. Honestly, as a temporary helper, this shouldn't have fallen on me. It had Travis's fingerprints all over it. He was leveraging something as important as a future-defining deal for personal reasons, throwing me into the fire. He doesn't seem like someone suited for the position of department head. The following weeks were grueling. With the weight of the company's future on my shoulders, I couldn't afford to mess up. The stress gnawed at my stomach. Each night on my way home, I grabbed energy drinks from my favorite shop just to keep going. Thankfully, my colleagues rallied around me. Tiffany, especially, stayed late to help me prepare, and I couldn't be more grateful. Thanks. If you hadn't helped, this would have been so much worse. Helping a friend is just what you do. But you owe me a nice meal when this is over, okay? I know. I'll treat you to the best dinner you've ever had. Then came the day of the event. At last, the fateful day has arrived. With all the necessary materials in hand, Tiffany and I headed to the client's office. After giving our names at reception, we were escorted to a meeting room. The moment we walked in, a foreign colleague greeted us in English, catching me by surprise. At that moment, I realized what Travis had been planning. A confused Tiffany leaned in and spoke to me in a low voice. Wait, do we have to handle this in English? Looks like it. Guess we've got no choice but to face it head on. Face it? Wait, you can do this, right? When Tiffany responded with a questioning look, I decided to show her through my actions. Seeing me begin to handle the situation in English, her eyes widened in surprise. The negotiation went surprisingly well, the atmosphere positive and encouraging. It seemed the client had intended to partner with us from the very beginning. The discussion even extended to post-deal logistics and planning. As the meeting progressed, more Japanese colleagues began trickling into the room. Clearly, the deal's importance had drawn in leaders from various departments. At this point, the discussion had become too detailed for me to handle alone. I was about to explain the situation to the newly joined Japanese colleague and suggest that we call it a day. However, it seems the situation wasn't that simple after all. Excuse me, isn't there a product presentation scheduled in the main conference room right after this? We'll guide you there now unless you have another engagement? Tiffany and I instinctively exchanged glances, both of us saying, huh? Wait, I didn't hear anything about this. Is this some kind of mistake? No, it's probably Travis pulling the strings again. But since we've got everything we need, it's better to handle this without making a scene. I had already committed to seeing this through, and an extra challenge wouldn't change that now. We headed to the main conference room for round 2. On the way, I received a text from Travis. The timing was so perfect, so pointed, that I couldn't help but begrudgingly admire his pettiness. Is it time for the presentation yet? The text continued with a stream of meaningless filler, but I skipped to the end where it concluded. Useless people have no place here. It was then I remembered, he still believed that nonsense about my academic background. When we reached the main conference room, I stepped onto the stage that had been prepared. Taking a deep breath, I quickly organized the flow of the presentation in my mind, planning to deliver it in both Japanese and English to suit the multinational audience. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. I said this first in Japanese, then immediately switched to fluent English. At first, I noticed some people tilting their heads in confusion at my words, and I couldn't help but nod in understanding. It seemed that everyone here had been told the product explanation would be given in English. As I continued speaking, referencing the materials and explaining the product in detail, I scanned the room. The audience appeared attentive, without any trace of hostility. Clearly, there was no one here trying to sabotage me. As I stood on stage continuing my presentation, I noticed someone new entering the large conference room. It was Travis, who was supposed to be back at the company. Perhaps he had come to check whether his subordinates were handling the presentation properly. However, when he saw me explaining fluently, he looked visibly surprised. Before long, his face contorted with frustration, and he left the room without a word. After the presentation, Tiffany and I returned to the office. I gave my report to the Overseas Business Division and then stopped by the sales department. It felt oddly nostalgic after working in a different department for so long. As I looked around, I noticed something familiar sitting on my colleagues' desks, the small recording devices I had distributed earlier. Seeing them still there, untouched, reassured me that my plan was progressing smoothly. But Travis wasted no time. He stormed over to me with a scowl. "I saw that. What the hell was that about? No one told me anything. What do you mean that? Don't play dumb. You were speaking fluent English at the client's company, weren't you?" I had only asked to make sure there was no mistake, but it seemed he thought I was messing with him. Travis glared at me, slamming his desk forcefully with a loud bang. "I didn't know you could speak English that well. Were you lying to us this whole time? And on top of that, I heard you introduced yourself as a graduate from a top-tier university during the negotiation." I was shocked when I heard about it from one of the client's colleagues on the way back. I never intended to lie. I made it clear during my self-introduction to Travis from the very beginning. The day Travis became manager, all the colleagues had introduced themselves, but clearly, he hadn't been paying attention. Travis glared at me, furious. With a sudden motion, he grabbed a pen from his desk and hurled it at me. I had anticipated the move and easily sidestepped it. Undeterred, Travis began throwing more items, his pencil case, a folder, even a crumpled wad of paper, until, eventually, his desk was cleared except for one item, a recording device. Seeing it, he finally seemed to regain some composure. "Fine. Let's stay calm." Changing his approach, he steadied his breathing and, with a look of frustration, grabbed my hand firmly. "Well done. You really came through this time. I'm so proud of you." From the outside, it might look like a boss showing care for his subordinate, but no one knows the truth better than I do. Travis's mouth is twitching, and more than anything, the incredible force gripping my hand says it all. It felt like I was a small animal caught in a snake's coils. Still, I had no choice but to endure it. After holding the handshake for a good several seconds, Travis finally let go and snorted dismissively. "Don't get cocky. I'll make sure you're out of here one way or another." With that venomous warning, his voice dropped into a threatening growl. After taking a deep breath to calm himself, Travis turned away. "Get back to your work. I don't want to waste any more time talking to you." Of course, I felt the same way. Since I had nothing to say to Travis, I quickly left the scene. A week had passed since then. Travis continues to subject me to small acts of harassment. That said, most of them are fairly trivial. He would drop by to nag me for trivial reasons or send me out to buy lunch for him like I was some errand boy. Thankfully, he rarely came around when I was working with other departments, so I had some peace. I was carrying several sheets of paper for colleagues who preferred sketching designs on paper rather than using a computer. Tiffany, always willing to help, grabbed half the load and struck up a conversation. "Now that you mention it, Travis used to pop by here all the time, but I haven't seen him around lately. I thought back over the past couple of days before answering. Yeah, you're right. I wasn't sure if Travis was finally reflecting on his actions or if he was quietly plotting something else. The latter possibility left me uneasy. I'd managed to pull off that negotiation and presentation successfully. But if I had failed, the entire company would have faced serious repercussions. Well, I can't say I miss him. But hey, you're using a different recorder today, aren't you? I glanced down at my chest pocket and smiled faintly. Sharp eye. The old one's been acting up, so I sent it in for repairs. This one's a replacement. Ha! Still, why do you always carry a recorder around? Oh, well. I hesitated slightly in my response. I couldn't exactly tell her I was using it to document Travis's behavior. It's for work. Sometimes ideas pop into my head, and it's easier to record them as voice memos. Wow, that's very you, Matthew. Always so dedicated to your job. Her compliment made me think of Travis again. Travis, being Mr. Stevens's relative, lived a life of luxury. He often replaced his belongings, clothes, gadgets, and accessories on a whim and carelessly discarded what he no longer wanted. Every time I saw him do that, I couldn't help but feel saddened for the craftsmen and manufacturers who put their effort into making those items. It was clear he'd never once thought about the people behind the products he used. Speaking of your recorder, I remember seeing you talking to Mr. Stevens about a month ago. I could have sworn you two were discussing something about recorders. Oh, that? It was nothing. He was just asking for my opinion on a new product. Tiffany gave me a long, steady look before turning her gaze elsewhere. Well, if it's something you can't talk about, I won't press you. It seemed she had seen right through me. It wouldn't be long before I could tell her the truth, but lying to a friend still left me feeling guilty. While we were talking, it seemed the break time had arrived. Colleagues began wrapping up their work and leaving the office one after another. Some headed to the cafeteria, while others went to the convenience store, each with their own plans. Amid all this, the two of us left the company to visit a nearby ramen shop. As we walked, students passed by in front of us, perhaps finished early due to exam periods or shortened school hours. Those university days feel so nostalgic. As I muttered that while watching the young people, Tiffany nodded in agreement, saying, "Yeah, that's true." At 33, you start to look back on that time with nostalgia. Back then, even when we messed up, we had adults to step in and help us out. I'm so grateful for that. You've always been a challenger. Of course. I had so many things I wanted to try. I was lucky to have teachers and mentors who let me explore freely. Tiffany had attended a different university than I had, but she'd clearly made the most of her time there. I knew she'd participated in study abroad programs, interned at startups, and taken on countless challenges. But I don't think Travis had the same kind of experience. What do you mean? The other day, I ran into him in one of the company hallways. He wasn't alone, he had this big, bodyguard-looking guy with him. Really? That's interesting. Yeah. That man was loudly telling Travis, "If you're going anywhere, let me know." He spoke as if they'd known each other for years. I see. Maybe Travis feels trapped by all that. I had only ever known Travis as the tyrant in the office. I'd never considered what his personal life might be like. But if what Tiffany said was true, living under the watchful eye of a bodyguard sounded suffocating. Maybe Travis grew up in an environment where taking risks or making mistakes wasn't allowed. With that somber thought hanging in the air, we walked in silence toward our usual ramen spot. After lunch, we returned to the office just a few minutes before the break ended, only to find my desk in complete disarray. This is awful. Who could have done this? For the time being, I asked the people who had been eating their lunch indoors what had happened, but they only turned pale and said nothing. I recognized this reaction immediately. It was the same look I'd seen on colleagues who had been screamed at by Travis. Clearly, they'd been intimidated or threatened into keeping quiet. I turned to a nearby desk, where one of my colleagues was sitting, and discreetly retrieved the small recorder I'd given him earlier. Tiffany noticed and tilted her head in confusion. "Wait a minute. Isn't that one of those recorders you gave out?" "Yeah, I asked them to keep it on their desks, just in case." "Just in case? What do you mean?" I explained the recorder in detail to Tiffany, who looked puzzled. After hearing that, Tiffany let out a sigh of admiration, as if it all made sense to her. "Wow, so that's what those little gadgets were for. I just thought you were a recording enthusiast or something." "Hey now, I do like recorders, for the record." Yeah, we can discuss your tech hobbies later." "But Travis is going to lose his mind when he finds out about this." I nodded. Travis had run rampant for far too long, mistreating colleagues and abusing his authority. It was finally time to bring all of this to light. The following day, when I arrived at the office, I was immediately summoned along with Travis. The destination was the president's office. After meeting up with Travis along the way, we entered the room, where the person sitting at the desk looked directly at us. The man responsible for carrying this company on his shoulders was Mr. Stevens, who also happened to be Travis's uncle. Though he was in his 50s, he maintained a youthful appearance that could easily pass for someone a generation younger. His hair was naturally streaked with gray, and he wore a simple, unadorned suit. At a glance, he might seem like an unassuming middle-aged man. However, he was the exceptional figure who had taken this company from the brink of collapse to rapid growth in just a few years. Travis, seemingly unable to understand why Mr. Stevens had summoned us, glanced around the room in confusion, his gaze wandering restlessly. Sir, what is this about?" Perhaps unable to endure the heavy atmosphere in the room, Travis stammered as he opened his mouth. In response, Mr. Stevens sighed and looked at Travis's face. "Travis, you've let me down." Saying that, Mr. Stevens pulled out a paper bag, likely from behind his desk. Inside it was the small recorder I had distributed to my colleagues. While I had been working in the sales department, those recorders had been sitting on my colleagues' desks as mere decorations. However, the time had come for them to serve their purpose, so they were all collected at once. "Why are those here?" Unable to keep up with the situation, Travis turned his gaze toward me. His look seemed to ask if I knew something about this. However, I said nothing. Mr. Stevens pulled a small recorder out of the desk drawer. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary recorder, but when Mr. Stevens pressed a small button on its side, the outer casing opened, revealing another, even smaller recorder inside. That's. As Travis stared in shock, Mr. Stevens began to explain. "As you can see, this is a disguised recorder. Matthew used it to record your words, the countless intolerable insults you hurled. When I listened to them, I had no choice but to reflect on my own foolishness." "No, Uncle. It's not like that. This is." Travis's face paled in an instant, and with a trembling voice, he spoke to Mr. Stevens. However, even when faced with his panicked nephew, Mr. Stevens showed no sign of being shaken. "Be quiet. I don't recall giving you permission to make excuses." At the sound of his uncle's cold voice, Travis let out a startled cry and stepped back. I believed it was my duty to honor my sister's wishes and raise her child without hardship. But it seems I made a mistake. Hearing such unexpectedly personal words, I froze, unsure of how to respond. While I had my own thoughts about Travis, I couldn't pretend to be unaffected when listening to someone's private matters. Besides, I never intended to become the kind of person who takes pleasure in someone else's misfortune, so I simply didn't know how to react. "Travis, you're fired. I gave you the position of department manager because I thought you were capable. But I was wrong. It seems I must now question everything, your school records, the praise I once heard from your teachers, everything." Having said that, Mr. Stevens shifted his gaze away from his nephew Travis and looked at me. his demeanor clearly signaling that the conversation was over. Travis, who had just been informed of his dismissal, whispered in a faint voice, "Wait. Please, I'll do better from now on. So forgive me." "I'm sorry, Uncle. People don't change so easily. You failed in your role as a manager, and I have no reason to give you another chance." "No. No way. Do you hate me, Uncle? Until now, you've always given me everything I asked for. That was when you were a child. But now you're an adult, and I will treat you as one." He must have realized there was no longer any room for appeal. Hearing those words, Travis clung to Mr. Stevens, sobbing uncontrollably like a child. However, Mr. Stevens said nothing to his nephew and instead turned his gaze toward me. "Well done, Matthew. Thanks to you, we avoided what could have been significant damage to this company. You also handled the recent negotiation admirably. I was right to trust you with this task. Thank you, sir." Mr. Stevens had apparently been suspicious for some time about the high number of colleagues in the sales department taking leave. In fact, the reason I ended up working in the overseas business department was due to a secret request from Mr. Stevens. While I was still in the sales department, I received an email from him. The email detailed my transfer to the overseas business department and a certain confidential mission. Mr. Stevens, suspicious about the frequent leaves being taken in the sales department, asked me to uncover the cause. Officially, my move was framed as providing support to the understaffed overseas business department, but in reality, I was tasked with investigating Travis's behavior. That's why I used the recorder to document Travis's actions in words. Now, the problem was resolved. And yet, despite everything, I felt a lingering unease. Believing that things couldn't stay as they were, I gathered my courage and spoke to Mr. Stevens. "Sir, I know it's not my place, but is there really no way Travis can be given another chance?" Hearing those words, Mr. Stevens looked surprised. After checking on the still crying Travis, he turned his gaze directly to me. "You don't hold any resentment toward Travis for what he did?" "I do resent him. But it's also true that I've only been handling this work for a few months, and, honestly, I was genuinely happy to know that you, Mr. Stevens, had expectations for me." I recounted an incident to Mr. Stevens that had happened a short while ago. There was a time when I had checked whether the recorder was working properly, and during that moment, I overheard something Travis had said. "Uncle believes I can do this, that I can be a department manager. I can't let those other guys drag me down. I have to work hard and prove myself." From those words, I sensed a deep affection for his uncle. There were other signs, too, that Travis genuinely cared about him. Despite his tendency to throw away anything he no longer needed or grew tired of, there was one thing Travis refused to discard, even as it became worn and battered. It was the wristwatch he mentioned during his self-introduction as sales department manager, a gift from his uncle when he was a child. "If anyone touches this watch, I won't let it slide. This is something precious my uncle gave me." Seeing Travis's attitude toward the watch, I came up with an idea. If there was something he valued, then perhaps he could learn to respect what others held dear, too. With that thought in mind, I decided to give my colleagues small recorders as gifts. "This will be useful for jotting down work ideas," I told them as I handed out the recorders, though, in truth, they served a different purpose. It was to record Travis's inappropriate behavior. But to my colleagues, the recorders would be meaningful gifts. That way, I figured Travis wouldn't dare tamper with them. Hearing this, Mr. Stevens looked at Travis with a surprised expression. After a brief moment of thought, he addressed Travis in a calm voice. "I failed to see the harm my nephew was causing. That is my mistake. Fine, Travis, I'll give you one last chance. But you will step down from your position as department manager." Hearing Mr. Stevens' words, Travis broke down, tears streaming down his face as he collapsed on the spot. Sensing it was time to leave, I gave a brief farewell and quietly exited the room. Later, when I reported the outcome, Tiffany sighed and said, "You're too soft." But I felt it was the right thing to do. Because I believe that if anything can be undone, then it's worth trying to start over again. Travis's road to redemption, however, was far from easy. He was reassigned to grueling warehouse duties, where he worked long hours on his feet. I heard that on days when inventory numbers didn't match up, his supervisors reprimanded him harshly. On particularly harsh days of scolding, I heard he goes crying to his uncle. Some nights, exhausted from overtime, he sat in the cafeteria venting to colleagues, "My uncle and my boss are both so heartless." Still, he had been given a chance, and now it was up to him to make the most of it. As for me, I've been struggling every day since taking over as department head in Travis's place. Having been promoted to department head in his stead, I've had a hard time adjusting to my new role. The responsibilities were heavier than I had anticipated, and the late nights piled up as I adjusted to my new role. But despite the challenges, I found purpose in the work. Recently, one of Tiffany's ideas was adopted by the company, and plans are underway to manufacture a new product for the overseas market. We're now working hard to bring it to life. We have to do our best to create a product that can be used internationally. You're right. Being a department head is tough, but if I have time, I'll try to come up with a design that can actually be turned into a product. Hoping to create something that can succeed in the global market, we continue to dedicate ourselves to our work today. And then, today, I made a life-changing decision. For years, I had been keeping a secret. I was the adopted son of the CEO of a major corporate group. When I was in college, my mother remarried. My stepfather, who had no children of his own, chose me as his successor. But at the time, I wasn't ready. I knew that inheriting such a position without the skills or experience to back it up would be meaningless. So when I graduated, I turned down my stepfather's offer to join his company. Instead, I pleaded to start at a smaller, less prominent firm where I could learn from the ground up. I argued that understanding the operations of subsidiaries and tackling real challenges would make me a better leader in the long run. Reluctantly, my stepfather agreed, and I joined this company anonymously. Only Mr. Stevens had been made aware of the truth. I've been building my skills while working at this company. Now, I feel that I've gained enough experience. So today, I called my adoptive father and told him I was ready to return as the CEO of the entire group. He was delighted, and it was decided that I would officially take over next month. From now on, I will carry even greater responsibilities, using the experience I've gained so far. I intend to give my all for the growth of the group and, above all, for the happiness of the colleagues. When I told Tiffany about this decision, she was surprised but gave me her heartfelt congratulations. "Matthew, you're going to be an incredible CEO." "I know it. But promise me you'll still come visit us." "I wouldn't be here without you, Tiffany. You're part of the reason I've come this far." While I feel some anxiety about this new challenge, I am filled with excitement even more. I will never forget my humble beginnings and will continue to embrace a mindset of constant learning. With that vow in my heart, I began preparing to open the next chapter of my life.